wouldn't see us for like September.
But yeah,
She has left his farm.
yeah. Well, these guys are in good to be.
I'm pretty certain I'm going to get a positive breathing on my right shoulder. Yeah, it is. Isn't any fun?
No, I know.
Just as a FYI.
Okay. I got it. No, we didn't. Well, they're both the same arm. Oh, then I'll
I see the film contest for you.
Yeah.
Red, who did your work? Who did your surgery?
I've been in the same position.
In your past,
Oh, yeah. 6 pins.
rotator cuff and bicep tendon tear.
Fantastic. I tell people all the time it was the worst surgery I ever had. 25-year wrestling career. Worst surgery I ever had.
Shoulders aren't trying to get up here.
My problem is, you scared the hell out of me. My surgeon, medical assistant, the person, physician assistant, all said how bad it was going to be. The only problem I've had is sleeping because you can't roll.
Exactly.
Basically, actually, I'm going to deal.
Oh, God.
How you doing?
Fine. How are you? This time like that?
No, I actually came out of the first night. By the next morning, probably by the second day, I was down to one Percocet a day, and very little pain. I took one at night for the first 4 or 5 days, and then I take out, and I'm just taking Tylenol when I need it. Already started PT, already started physical therapy. I just finished my third session. So.
Well, it depends on where you see your doctor post-op. I didn't see mine.
I saw my surgery was on Tuesday, so I'm post-op on Friday, and so they didn't waste any time.
Well, they don't anymore.
So, all right. Well, let's call this august group of fine individuals together. So the Crips are in charge up here.
That's a CRIPS.
So just in case you were wondering who won, I won. No, but I think we both had rotator cuff repair. I had a bicep tendon and also rotator cuff, and I don't know what Reb had other than rotator cuff.
And bicep and 2 other tendons.
Yeah, he's older, so he did.
Microphone, Reb.
Turn up your hearing aids.
They're up, baby. They're up as loud as they go, and I've got fresh batteries in. So there.
Yeah. So, but Reb had rotator cuff surgery too, and some things. So anyway, so good news is we're here and on a quick mend of recovery, so it's all good. And all right, so let's start off. Call the meeting to order, and then we'll start off with reading of the purpose statement. The primary objective of the CAC is to ensure the capital maintenance and public transportation projects and programs approved by the voters during November 2nd, 2004 and November 6, 2012 elections are accomplished with PPRTA funds. This committee reports directly to the Board of Directors. All members, alternates, all members can vote today. So if you're an alternate, you can take any votes. You're welcome. Do I hear a motion for approval of the agenda?
Second.
Rev and Joan. Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment period for items not on the agenda? Reb has one.
Yeah, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in memory of our deputy from the sheriff's office and a moment of thanks for all those first responders. I lived very near that scene, and there were a lot there. Thank you.
I have one as well, and just before I forget it, the PPACG, as some of you may know, is the designated regional transportation planning organization for the area. They're in the process of taking a transportation survey for the 2045 regional transportation plan. You can access that survey from their website. If you need the link, myself or Rick or somebody can get it to you. But I would encourage you, that's a long-range planning effort, and we tend to work a little bit more near-term, but there's a bridge there, and it's an opportunity for you or people that are actively engaged in fixing transportation issues to contribute what you know about what we do in the transportation world, at least from our end. So I encourage you to pass that along to people, and also encourage you to go take that survey and let the PPACG folks know what your thoughts are. So, and then there's been a lot of conversation about the expansion of Banning Lewis and the cities trying to renegotiate some things. I'm not sure exactly where, so I'm throwing this out where to address this, but I'm throwing it out to you guys because a lot of you are more connected than I am. But a transportation concern that we have with the build-out of that is the east-west corridors. There's an east-west corridor study that's been going on for years. Constitution Avenue, other places, there's communities that have resisted any expansion of doing any of that kind of stuff. But I think from a long-range perspective, the build-out of that is going to seriously impact east-west traffic in this city in a big way. And it's going to dump it onto Platt Avenue and from 24 and other places. And so if any of you are aware or hear of someone dusting that thing off or aware of anything of people addressing, I would be interested in knowing, so that I could attend and try to stay up on what's going on in that, because it's not an easy fix for one. It's certainly not cheap. But when I look in the 2035 plan, 2035 is too late if we build out. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm asking if you know of something going on. I would appreciate knowing about it. Tom?
I'd also like to introduce Brian Galvin.
Oh.
Brian's the newest member representing the Highway Advisory Commission.
Okay. Welcome, Brian. Welcome. And Bethany, this is your last meeting too, right? She is moving on to bigger and better things. We will certainly miss her, and she's done an awesome job of supporting us and other members of PPACG and the RTA staff, and wish you the best of luck. Rick, did you have a question?
I was just going to mention that I participated in that east-west mobility, and I think I have the full set of documents that we used for that I could probably pull out of the archives if you're interested.
Yeah, I'm partially familiar with that, the study from years ago, but what I don't hear in the advertisement and the discussion about this is any rhetoric having to deal with that. I only hear about it from a developer standpoint and trying to build it out, and not the impact on the citizens that don't live anywhere near it. And that's my concern.
Well, if you hear something, let me know, because I want to participate to continue to protect Constitution.
Sure.
You say you have a personal vested.
Personal vested interest in that. Okay. All right.
I have some of the historical documents as far as annexation agreements, because Colorado Center Metro District met with CSU as we're talking about water capacity as it pertains to Banning Lewis Ranch, south end by CCMD. So I'd be happy to share those documents
Okay.
with you.
Thank you. Are there any public comments from anyone in the audience? Seeing none, we'll move on. Item number 4, approval of minutes from January 3rd. Do I hear a motion to approve? Cheryl, motion, second?
Second.
Joan, second. Thank you. All those in favor? I guess we should vote on the agenda too, right? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good. We covered the legal hurdle. All right, Bev, financial.
Good afternoon. Wow, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so we received November's sales and use tax quite a while ago now. We should be receiving December's like in the next few days. But the $8,019,000 was under the monthly budget by $451,000 or 5.3%. So unfortunately, we are under the annual budget by $436,000 year to date, and hopefully we have a really good December. The city hasn't published what their December looked like. There was an article in the paper, and it's a little confusing because they're really talking about November sales in that article, even though they kind of call it December. But anyway, hopefully we had a really good Christmas season at the stores that were not online. Anyway, so on page 2, then we're ahead in November by only $9,000 or almost $4.5 million for the year, ahead of last year's. So the rest of the reports, there's the revenue and expense summaries, and then after that, the project to date summaries. And on page 6 and 7, you can see we're getting close to finishing up the first 10-year capital list. Mark Shuffle Road North, that section has the reserve in it. We moved that to that item, so that's what you're seeing there, the $4.8 million left on page 7. So it's nice to kind of see that winding down. Are there any questions?
Tony?
If this trend continues, and I know that it was based on the auto sales primarily over a couple months there from the hailstorm previously and so on, but if that trend continues, I mean, how is that going to affect our budget going forward and, for this year, since the budget's already been approved and so on?
Right. Well, I flatlined it to $100 million, which is the same as this year's. I didn't increase it. I'd gotten some advice to increase it by 3%, but we stay pretty conservative. But I would hope that we at least make the $100 million. I'm concerned about the revenue over budget for the I-25 GAP project. So I just hope that things continue to go up next year like they did at the beginning of this year.
Again on that question, can you hear me here?
Yeah.
The question here, based on that article in the paper, I did read that. I'm not as optimistic. What is the basis for your optimism that we'll be on budget for this year?
I'm not.
About $2 million short.
I'm not. No, we have $100 million sales and use tax budget. So right now we're $500,000 short. And if December sales are less than the budget, we could be, I don't know, anything below. I don't know. It could range from the $500,000 if they're equal to, I don't know. I doubt $2 million for the sales and use tax for 1 month, but that would really surprise me. So there's no way of really estimating the sales and use tax figure, and we've always just kept it pretty flat, but go up in the mid-year budget amendment, because we have a better idea at that time. See, when we did our budget for the sales and use tax number, it was all the way back in August. Well, we get sales and use tax 2 months in arrears, so you're really only going through June as far as knowing what you have. Well, through June, it was pretty good last year. So we'll just have to see what happens. We don't typically bring the sales and use tax budget down mid-year, so
But it is an option.
it is an option, yeah.
And what that would mean that for the member governments, projects that they had planned based on the higher budget level would either have to be slowed or pushed to another year to match the thing. So I mean, we're still going to get stuff done, just may not be at a faster, it may be at a slower pace.
Yeah. And we have a reserve of 10%.
Right.
And 3% of it's Tabor, so the rest of it we could use if we needed to. Because we don't have a cash flow issue. Because we collect, this is a pay-as-you-go. We collect before it's really started, and then it takes, the projects are really started, and then it takes so long to get through the public input process and the design and everything that we're in pretty good shape.
So we never do any deficit spending or anything. So
No, we don't borrow any money.
Jane, you had a question?
Yes, definitely refresh my memory on why the water did seems pretty consistent in the year. And I don't, you explained before, but I don't recall.
Well, now this year it was because last year there was a hailstorm and people were putting on a lot of new roofs and buying new cars. So that made us go below this year towards the second half of the year. And different things happen like that from time to time. I mean, it's just not a straight line based on the prior year, but I wasn't really affected by that hailstorm, but a lot of people were. So it's not something that really stuck in my mind. But
Oh,
I just read the lines.
Oh.
2016,
right.
okay.
and we adjusted budget-wise for that.
Right.
No problem.
No problem.
Okay. Any more
other questions for Bev?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bev. Okay, item number 6, 2018 capital maintenance and public transportation contract, City of Colorado Springs. Mike?
Good afternoon, Mike Chavez, City Engineering. I've got 4 items for review today. The first item is a survey monument preservation contract with the Rampart Survey. So the operations group, they sometimes are taking out old sidewalks or repairing sidewalks that have monumentation in the old parts of town, Colorado City, and even Old North End. So those need to be preserved because they're used by the survey community. So that's a contract to mark them and then to reset them.
That's the little brass cylinder.
There's the old areas of town. There's actually what they're called 5x5s, and they're little X or little nail that's in the middle of the sidewalks, and they're an offset to the actual property lines. And the survey community uses those quite a bit. So we've got a program where we work with all departments, and they notify us and engineering, or they call the surveyors to locate them and reset them after they're done.
Okay. So that 5x5 is inch, not feet?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it is 5. They're 5-foot offsets.
Offset, okay, all right.
Next item, operations is looking at purchasing, there's 2 items there, a couple of things. The first one, they're looking at getting a milling machine for their in-house work, I believe. I have the bids that were submitted on that one. The next one is a small paver. There was 2 bids. One bid was not responsive, so the price that they got is listed there. If there's any more questions on those 2, I'll have to have Corey come up.
I have a question if someone else doesn't.
Okay.
Corey, just help me understand, please. On the milling machine, it's being purchased with maintenance money?
Yeah, so our milling machine is utilized in several maintenance operations that we do, anything from dig out to small paving projects, specifically our mechanized patching, our maintenance paving operation. So that machine starts working in March and April, typically, and runs clear through to November. If we have good weather, then we can work. Obviously, this winter we've been able to try to get out and do some work, but that milling machine is working constantly. The milling machine that we have right now is 13 years old. It has 7,000 hours on it. Average hours to get a new machine is typically about 4,000, industry average. So we're almost double that at this point in time. We took it in. We've been trying to limp this thing along for quite a while, and we took it in and had Hanan do a diagnostic on it, and it's upwards between $150,000 to $200,000 in maintenance that this machine needs at this point. And at that point, we made the decision. Well, we can't continue to throw money at this thing. We just need to get a new machine. So my first step was I did approach City Fleet and talked to Ryan Trujillo about the potential purchase of one of these machines. We've been doing very well with City Fleet in the last 2 years. We're going to be spending upwards of $6.9 million in vehicles and equipment this year on that, and he said, absolutely not. You're at your max. So,
all right. My question would be, though, is it a capital piece of equipment? Are you carrying it on your books as a capital piece of equipment and then depreciating it? I guess can we use capital money to purchase equipment?
This is maintenance money.
Okay.
Maintenance dollars.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I guess I'm just questioning whether we should use capital because it's the accounting part is kicking in my head right now.
We've always used maintenance dollars for
All right.
maintenance equipment in the past.
Okay, all right. That answers the question. We've always done it that way. That's fine.
Okay.
Gene, you had your hand up?
I have a question about PPRTA too, because I didn't think that there was a maintenance line item in it. I thought it was all capital.
No, there's a maintenance line.
Well, that's not true, because maintenance, it was all capital in 2. Maintenance and transit are ongoing. They're not limited by a revote. It's just capital projects. Right, Rick?
Yes. PPRTA 2 applies only to capital.
Turn your hearing aids.
Yeah, we love being gaslighted.
The 10-year sunset in the original 2004 ballot just applied to the capital. It was renewed again for another 10 years, the capital was, in November 2012 for another 10 years, 2015 to 2024. So the maintenance and transit continue indefinitely, and they are still very much in the budget and still very much being spent by the member governments. So maintenance is perpetual.
So this is improperly listed in here as maintenance of the PPRTA too, because it's really maintenance of the PPRTA, the original.
You could scratch the room in the
Reb?
Yeah, this is something for down the road. We did PPRTA in 2012, and I would assume we would do 3 in 2022. Okay, so this is way down the road. Do the voters have a clue that we are buying equipment? So it's almost mandatory that we continue with PPRTA, period. The city isn't going to get any larger, quote, capacity-wise or number of roads, but equipment is going to wear out, so you have to pay for it. And in the current general budget, you don't have, I think you said 6.9 million this year for equipment. Well, I'm sorry, it's going to wear out before the next issue comes up. So basically, people ask me, why is PPRT, I have been asked twice now that I can recall, why are we buying equipment? And I have to, well, you need to have the road paved, and if you want it paved, you got to do this and this and this. Oh, but why is it listed as maintenance? Well, I don't have an adequate explanation for you, the average citizen, okay? So I'm just saying, 10 years, no, not 10, what is it? 8 years from now? 6 years from now?
Doesn't matter, next cycle.
Okay, from the accounting standpoint, one thing that's different about the RTA is we don't own any of the equipment. It goes straight to the city, so it's not really capitalizable on our books because we don't own anything.
Right, yeah, I forgot about that. Yep, thanks, Beth.
Basically, I'm saying in a short period of time, 4 years approximately, we're going to have people asking questions about PPRTA 3.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
you'll have the answers that we have to give those people, right?
I think you answered it. I mean, we have to have the equipment to get the work done.
Do the work done.
To get the work done. Again, we have, we've got a list here. Through the city just this year, we're purchasing 12 tandem dump trucks, 13 utility and crew trucks, 3 front-end loaders, 4 that are 3 cubic yard front-end loaders, 1 5 cubic yard front-end loader, 1 backhoe and 1 skid steer, and that's not counting all of the drainage equipment that we have to purchase as well, excavators, et cetera, that are also going to be going into that. So we've been given a budget. That's one of the mayor's key initiatives for his strategic plan is to have a return to a vehicle replacement or equipment replacement policy so that we can keep this stuff going. The fact of the matter is I'm tapped out on what they'll allow me to have, and I've got equipment that doesn't work at this point. So we either get the equipment or we can't get the job done.
Tony?
So this might help. This is the way I think of it in explanation of that. Corey, do you use this equipment in RTA projects?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is having the RTA projects that make it so that they're used more during any particular year because we have RTA projects working?
Correct.
So it wears out faster because of RTA projects than it would without RTA projects?
Correct. The majority of my work is RTA, with the exception of 2C, obviously, but that's contracted. Pretty much all of our in-house operations are PPRTA.
So that to me right there explains it. Of course, because we have the RTA, because we have more projects getting done, because we have more things happening, we need the city, the county, everybody to be able to buy the equipment to get the RTA projects done as well. And stuff will wear out faster because of that.
And it is kind of twofold. So last year, we did come and were able to get 4 new pothole trucks, and I've been questioned on this quite a bit. We ended the year, record-breaking year. We crested over 90,000 potholes filled last year to the previous year, which we had a record of 63,000. And people say, well, how did you? Are there more potholes? The potholes have always been there. We know that. We went through and made our processes more efficient. That helped a little bit. The fact that we were able to get 4 new pothole trucks and our uptime went from below, for our trucks, went from below 50% of the time trucks on the road to above 64% of time trucks on the road was the difference in the amount of potholes that we were able to fill last year. So with the right tools to do the job, our production is soaring.
Sure. And we've had a lot of discussion over vehicles over the years, but for the benefit of Carlos and Brian, you can go back through the policy thing, but our purchase of equipment, allowing member governments, city to buy equipment is limited to specialty equipment only, not general purpose pickups and that kind of thing. And so they're exclusively, in a lot of cases, exclusively used for PPRTA projects. It just makes sense to maintain that equipment so they can continue to do their job. Rick?
And to amplify on that historical fact, there was a lot of discussion about vehicles of CAC and board, and that came to a head in a joint CAC and board meeting in the summer of 2014. And what came out of that is a board policy number 24 which stated that, yes, the PPRTA would continue to pay for the purchase and immediate transfers. Would never be, the title would never be in the name of the PPRTA, but to write the check for a member government to purchase specialty equipment and trucks, but to discontinue buying pickups. Pickups were purchased in 2005, 2006 with board approval, but in this 2014 joint meeting in summer, it was decided no more pickups. Yes, to continue to spend the city's PPRTA maintenance money on maintaining the pickups and fuel for the pickups, but once those pickups are taken out of service, PPRTA would not write checks for any more general purpose pickups. But the board and CAC at the time strongly agreed that PPRTA would continue to fund out of member government maintenance funds the purchase of specialty equipment.
Tom?
I think the key issue is, I think, just to amplify what Rick just said, it comes out of Colorado Springs maintenance allocation.
Right.
So it's your money to spend on PPRTA projects.
Gene?
I'm curious to know how many milling machines the city has had on a year-by-year basis back at the start of PPRTA 1.
How many milling machines?
Correct?
We've had one that we've owned. That's this one that's 13 years old. And we have rented other machines.
The city has only owned one
That's correct.
in the last 13 years.
That's correct.
Yeah, on
Okay.
one more question about the this capital, well, not capital equipment, but it's out of your maintenance budget, Cleardate's capital equipment. What is the typical lifespan for this type of equipment? Is it 10 years, 15 years?
Well, again,
how long do we expect it to last?
we looked it up. 13. This one's 13 years old and approaching 7,000 hours. Industry average for replacement's about 4,000 hours. You got to remember, this is a machine that's designed to eat up asphalt and spit it out. So there are a lot of wear items on it that we figure we have to replace teeth and belts and things of that nature. But we're probably looking at anywhere from, hopefully, if we take care of it the way we need to be doing, 8 to 10 years.
Okay. All right.
Corey, I think it's important to point out, even though the city owns this, they have been more than willing to share its specialized equipment. I'm going to point out something different than this type of equipment. They have some specialized painting equipment, striping, that sort of thing. And with their person operating, they have offered it, and actually I know the county for a fact has used their equipment to help the other member governments, entities. So it isn't like it's only being used by the city. And I think people ought to understand how well the governments are working together and trying to help each other out.
I see Jennifer approaching. Do you have something to contribute to this, Ms. Jennifer?
Jennifer Irvin, County Engineer. I just wanted to mention something just because the county was brought up. We do that, I think, on a regular basis between member governments, whether it's the City of Colorado Springs or El Paso County or Manitou Springs, just as a general rule, whether it's PPRTA or any other thing. I just note, just so that everybody's clear, because we do have some new members here, the county has made the choice, and each member government has to make the choice of how to spend their money. The county has made the choice not to spend our money on equipment and vehicles. We take that out of our regular road and bridge fund money. So at this point, we've put all of our money into actual physical material or contracting of the work out. So not saying that the city is wrong or the county is right. I'm just letting you know that that is our direction from our Board of County Commissioners. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, we beat this horse. Everybody clear? All right. Thank you very much for your information.
Okay. Last item we have is a design contract for HDR for the Circle Bridge replacements, and there's actually 4 separate bridges, but we have identified them in the list as 4. The first task that we're going to have them do, it's going to be at not to exceed $500,000. We're going to have them analyze the bridges and see if we should rehabilitate them or replace them, much like we did with the Academy Bridge over Conwood Creek. The rehab being, we probably get 20 to 30 years more out of it. New replacement is about 75 to 100. So that'll be the first part. But I did talk when we were discussing Academy. It was listed as a rehab, but we decided to replace it. I did want to mention or highlight that this is another bridge project that was identified as a rehab, but we want to analyze and see if it's not more effective and a better return on investment to replace them.
Okay. Brett?
Mike, is there a possibility, because you've listed this in quote 4 parts, which I understand, east, west, and which it's, how do I want to say it, which it's spanning, whether it's the bridge and the railroad, or the ditch and the railroad, or the road?
Well, it's
Possibility it's going to be split into 4 different designs?
well, no. Unfortunately, it was listed as 4 different bridges, but it's got to be done as one project, one package.
And it's going to be one.
Kind of like Woodman Road.
Yes. So this work will be analyzing all 4 of them and make a decision. And there's as we were looking at soliciting designers, they brought in different things. Do you replace them all 4? Is it one, maybe 2? There's different combinations. We'll look at that and then come back with a recommendation.
Gene?
What's the current rating of the state on the bridges?
I'm not familiar with what we have. We actually don't use the state's rating because the state rating is kind of like you just leave it alone until it's rated so bad you need to replace it now. And that's not a good way to manage a bridge program. So we have a condition rating where we kind of look at them and try to be a little more proactive and anticipate these bridges should be replaced or rehabbed before they get to the point where they become an emergency. And you got to go do something.
So this is, at this point, we know there needs to be work done. This is an exploratory to figure out what.
Well, no. It's now as far as our rating system, it's I don't want to say it pretty bad, but it's one of the ones what we analyze our bridges every 2 years for the major and minor. This one, the circle bridges are one that we actually check and inspect every 90 days because the condition is such that we won't keep it. So
Yeah.
So it is one of our more advancedly deteriorated bridges in our system.
Fillmore over the railroad.
And that's
tracks.
why it was an RTA project.
Carlos, you had a question?
We'll let you know if we need to. We did close it last year for a period where we had a little issue.
Again, I'll try to be brief here. This is a design contract, right? Is
Yes.
that correct? Does this design also include, there was also some studies with Las Vegas Street, with that corridor. Does this design also take into account that work that's been done?
No, because that was a corridor transportation study. This is just basically a bridge assessment and, alternative analysis.
But you're aware that bridge actually affects that corridor. For example, those piers are notoriously bad. They're very close to the road, and they inhibit. They actually may be a problem for pedestrians and cyclists. I'm just curious.
Oh yeah. We'll look at that as if.
I mean, just replacing a deck and leaving the piers there may not be really a good solution for that corridor.
No, and that's why we're looking at it. I mean, it depends on what kind of dollars we're looking at, but we would obviously rather replace it.
I would recommend to include, to take a look at that, or have that study being used, not just the bridge, but the entire corridor.
Yeah, no, we understand that corridor study was there, and certain things that came out of that we will take into account, but when we decide what we're going to do.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? We need a recommendation for approval for the city.
So moved.
Okay, strike the one.
Yeah,
strike the one.
we wanted
Yeah.
them identified.
I understand.
Second.
We have a second. Tony? Gene? Tony? Any other further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you.
And Corey, thank you for your information. El Paso County, Jennifer.
Good morning, Mr. President or Mr. Chair, and members. Well, at the Board of County Commissioners, we changed from chair to president, so it continues to get me. But anyway, Jennifer Irvin, county engineer. Good afternoon today. Here to talk about some cleanup we have on our Mark Sheffel project. And this is a property acquisition that we had some concerns about and couldn't come to an agreement on price. So we did what is called a possession and use agreement, which is pretty standard. And what it did is it allowed us to go ahead and deposit what we thought, based upon our appraisal, was fair market value for the property, and while we worked with the property owner to determine the final value of the property, which allowed us to go ahead and construct the project, and which we did and was completed and had a ribbon cutting. And so then we had been continuing to follow up with this property owner. What we went back and determined is that the valuation on the property had, the original appraisal that the county had done as we started this was pretty much in advance of the project, because we were trying to get ahead of the project. And by the time we actually made the offer, some of those valuations of the land had changed. And so what we did is we went back, because we did not agree with the property owner in regards to their appraisal, and we went back and actually got an updated appraisal, our appraisal updated based upon a more current valuation in 2017 versus, I think the original appraisal was done in, I'd have to look back to verify, but 2014 or 15. So in any case, we came down to updating our own appraisal, and the property owner had accepted that those updated appraisal numbers, and so they did not continue to ask for their valuation, which was way higher per their appraisals. But also included in this final settlement is a small amount of interest, which is identified as allowable per state statute and criteria as far as the Federal Uniform Act. And so we went ahead and included that in the valuation and the final determination. So what you have before you is the final property acquisition, and these actually I could have run separately just as a reporting item, but I just wanted to be as clear and transparent as possible, and showing you what we are doing. I think we came to a good settlement. We almost arrived at a condemnation with this property acquisition, but I think we were able to arrive with the updated appraisals at a reasonable settlement, which is still under what the property owner was trying to extract.
Did the value of the land go up after the road was put in?
No, this was valued in, and it's based on a valuation before the road went in. It's just we had tried to get ahead of some of those property acquisitions because we had so many on this corridor, and so we had done it in advance of our initial offer. And so based upon criteria, it really should be based upon that valuation at the time we submit that offer. So I think it's reasonable and appropriate to go back and update our appraisals. That's what we did. And I think it's a reasonable and appropriate settlement. We did, because we were thinking that we had to go to condemnation, we did get the Board of County Commissioners' approval to file condemnation if we needed to, and I think that helped settle the matter.
Yeah, something's better than nothing. Any other questions for Jennifer on this one? And you have a couple of others, or is this is going back, that's just history? Okay.
Yep. And so just, I wanted to mention, we did receive notice, and I will bring to you, this project did receive one of the CAPA awards, Colorado Asphalt Pavement Association. We just got notified for good asphalt work. I forget the title, but we'll bring it back once we receive it and present it. So staff will be receiving that award in February.
Good. It's a great stretch of road. Tony?
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Joan, second. Tony, motion. Any other further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so I'm going to ask for your indulgence, please. In item number 7, the CDOT folks are here to do their gap presentation. And so what I'm going to request is that we allow transit to do their their update, and then we move item 7F up and do the CDOT presentation. Does anybody have a problem
So
with
moved.
that? No problem? No, I'm not seeing any. Okay, with your tacit approval, we'll hear for transit now. Brian, are you still here?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much for letting me go now.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Brian Vitulli, City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metropolitan Transit, with your monthly transit report. We had a few issues with numbers for this report, and the copy that I'm passing out here now
Thank you.
is our
Revised.
best and final offer for this, and promise to have it go through one time next month. We had some issues with end of the year reporting, and the hard copy that's going out now is the most accurate report. So for our fixed route services for December of 2017.
It's dated January 17th. Is this the most current?
It is, yeah. For December of 2017, we provided approximately 232,000 trips. So this was a slight decrease of about 4% over December of 2016. And another error that I just found before I was waiting to come up here, you'll see that the boardings per revenue service hour decreased from 18 to 16.9. For our ADA paratransit service,
Brian,
yes.
just a quick question. With a statistic like that, in terms of boarding per revenue service hour, just throwing numbers out, if I've got 100 passengers on a route with a hour head time, and I add another bus, and I am now on 30-minute head time, but I still got only 100 passengers, wouldn't that lower the statistic per hour?
It does, yes. Yeah, when you add revenue service hours and your ridership stays flat, the performance of the route goes down.
Right,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to, I thought that was right, but I want to make sure.
Yeah.
So the assumption would be that when you make these route changes, for the long term, you hope to improve ridership because you're offering a better, more convenient service. And so it's not uncharacteristic to see an initial dip,
Right.
given the changes that you've made.
Right, exactly, yeah. So if you look at revenue service hours for December of 2016, you'll see that we provided 13,464. Well, now we've gone up to 13,731, but in December, ridership was lower than last December, so the effectiveness, the performance, the boardings per revenue service hour went down. But yeah, as Jim said, making those investments in more service, hopefully that will equate to more riders and better effectiveness in the future. For our ADA paratransit services, we provided a little over 15,000 trips in December, which was almost a 16.5% increase over that same time period. Our van pool services are still continuing to increase slightly, which is good news. On page 3, project update, we held our public process in January. January 23rd and 24th, we had 3 public meetings. Attendance was very good. We had about 17 and 28 at our 2 public meetings at City Hall, and then the one at the Southeast YMCA was not very well attended, but we got a lot of comments through our customer service group, email, phone calls, faxes. So and we're currently going through all of those comments, which will help us formulate our final recommendation. And as you've seen over the last couple months, we're doing a 2-phased improvement program here for 2018. The improvements that are going to be effective this April 29th include off-peak service improvements. So that's additional frequency on Saturdays on routes 1 and 3, and then adding some service on Saturday and Sunday. So that does not require us to have more vehicles, so that's why we're able to do that now. We have more vehicles on order that will be delivered in July or August that will allow us to put in a lot of those other service improvements this fall. We're also proposing to remove a detour that we had on Route 4, which was put in place when the Cimarron I-25 interchange reconstruction happened. So we're getting rid of that detour. And probably the item that garnered the most public comment was proposing to increase the ADA fixed route fare to 85 cents for all disabled riders. Actually, it's not an increase. It's kind of an inequity there in the system. Many, many years ago, there was a policy put in place where, if we provide an ADA paratransit trip, it costs us about $25. It's a very costly service to provide. And our transit system, our fixed route system, wasn't as robust back then. So we were looking to get disabled passengers who were able-bodied enough to use a fixed route system onto our fixed route system. So it would be a more effective
Incentive.
way to, instead of $25 a trip. And part of that policy was to certify them, and that would enable them to ride the fixed route for free. Well, now our system has grown. It's a little bit more robust now. There are actually other ways for people to get certified. There are disabled riders that go to the Independent Center to get certified, but they have to pay 85 cents to ride the fixed route system. And then you have other disabled passengers who choose not to get certified, and when they're feeling good enough, they choose to ride the fixed route system and they pay the half fare. So we have somewhat of a two-class disabled system where some disabled riders are using fixed route for free and some are paying 85 cents. So we're looking to kind of make that even across the board. And also, we feel it's appropriate to charge people for services that are being provided. And it is a half fare, it's 85 cents. So that did that was basically all of the comments that we got at our public meetings. There was very, very little, or if any, comments on the other good things that we're doing. So we're going through those comments now. We'll be making our final recommendation sometime later this month. So I'll be back at the March CAC meeting to brief you all on the way we're moving forward with that. But also, as this policy goes, if we do move forward with equalizing this free fare, making it not free anymore, we're not going to implement until Sunday, September 30th. So that will give those riders a chance to and some time to adjust their budgets or whatever that needs to happen there. Because that was some of the feedback that we got from the Community Transit Coalition, that if you do go this way, give those riders some notice to adjust things. So it'll be implemented later this year. Any questions about that before I go to the final item?
Tony?
Right now, what does it cost someone on Metro Mobility to get picked up by that service as opposed to the fixed route service? What does it cost the actual rider?
It's 85 cents for a Metro Mobility trip.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, $3.50.
Okay.
$3.50 for a regular ADA trip.
Okay.
For somebody to take ADA.
So there is still incentive for them to go to the fixed route, even
Exactly.
if it's going from 0 to 85 cents.
Yeah, and full fare on our fixed route system is $1.75.
Okay.
So if somebody, the argument, well, you're going to overwhelm our ADA system with riders, but that logic doesn't really play out, because why would you pay $3.50 for a trip when we're just asking you to pay 85 cents? So, per trip. So it's $1.70 for a round trip on fixed route. That's one way. That's one way, yeah.
Okay,
All right.
last item?
And then the last item here is something we just added, a budgetary change order. We executed in early January a change order to move the remaining $28,000 from Silver Key's 2017 contract from the city account to the PPRTA account. There were no dollars changed here, but it was just something that was done to allow Silver Key a little bit more flexibility in where those rides are provided, since city contract would govern just trips within the city. Moving it to the PPRTA side allows those trips to go throughout the PPRTA service area. Is that correct, Bev? Okay, good.
Okay, any questions for Brian? Thank you very much,
All right,
Brian.
thank you very much.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. Rick, you want to introduce the CDOT folks? Or would you mind, I should say?
As the CAC will recall, Karen Rowe, the district manager for District 2, CDOT's District 2, which we're in, came and spoke to you recently, and you had some questions for her about the concept of managed lanes, because managed lanes is an option that CDOT is considering for the 18-mile gap project from Highway 105 north to the south end of Castle Rock. And so she has asked the appropriate CDOT staff members to come and speak to you. I'll let each of them introduce themselves, and they can make the presentation about CDOT's managed lane concept.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. And if you can just bear with me here, I don't see very well from afar, so let's see. I'm getting old eyes. Okay, there we go. This is it right here. And then let me see if I can see. Do I have that right over down there?
Yep, you do
okay,
right
thank you. Thank you for your patience. Good afternoon.
Welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Tamara Harvey. Well, actually, that was, I lived here many years ago, and I used to be an anchor at KKTV, and my maiden name there was Susan Harvey. So I'm kind of slipping back in time a little bit. I'm a little nervous as I'm talking to you all this morning, so bear with me. Actually, I'm Tamara Rollison, and I am the communications manager for Region 1 in Denver, working for CDOT. And with me is Nick Farber, and he is operations manager with our high performance transportation enterprise division within CDOT. He's going to give the bulk of the presentation, but I did want to go over with you very briefly what we've been talking about over the last few weeks in a series of public meetings, very informal, small listening type of question-answer sessions that we have been holding in El Paso County. I thought you might be interested in seeing that. So I'm going to go along these slides fairly quickly. Let's see if this is... Not sure. Sorry about that. Okay. So we begin our listening session just with a general overlook of what we're looking at, which is improving the gap, 18-mile section of I-25 in between Castle Rock, just north of Monument. And as you know, it's the only remaining four-lane segment of I-25 between Colorado Springs and Denver. It does link two of our largest cities in the state. And there have been no major widening of this section of roadway in 60 years. We have had maintenance, we have had some safety improvements, but nothing significant. This stretch of roadway has served its purpose for many years. But in the last few years, as we have seen with the population growth and with the traffic impacts, that it is in great need of capacity improvements, and that's what we have heard from the public. Also, our own analysis shows that as well, too, and that's why we're here today, to let you know where we are with this project. And it's also one of the state's top transportation priorities. It is a major priority, we know, here locally and also along the corridor. Let's see. Still having some. Do I just press? Oh, there we go. Okay. So what we've been working on is called a PEL. That's a Planning and Environmental Linkages Study for the 34-mile segment of I-25 south from Monument to C-470. And you may have heard some things about the PEL study. That's an overall visioning exercise that we're going through to develop a long-term vision for the corridor. We've had a lot of meetings with the public on that since January of last year, I believe, as to what are the long-term needs to improve the I-25 section, mainly from Monument into Castle Rock. And so from that process was identified an early action project emerged for the 18-mile segment, which is known as the GAP. Okay. So what we heard during the PPL process, which is a very important part of our environmental work, and right now we are in what is called the environmental assessment of this project. We cannot move forward with construction until we finish the study, and we're very much in the midst of that right now. We're also doing design as well, too. And so what we're doing during this stage of the process is determining what would best meet the project in need. And those 4 items that you see were identified through our study and analysis, and also what we heard from the public. Why do we need improvements to this project? And they're really ranked in order. And what we've heard and what we also know is that capacity is needed, greater capacity is needed. Travel reliability ranked number 2. It's very important. Motorists, they want to have a reliable trip during the short and long term. Safety is incredibly important. We have seen quite an increase in congestion, of course, delays, of course, but also crashes. There were about 1,800 crashes from 2011 to 2015, 620 injuries and 5 fatalities. And so if you average that out, that is about a crash a day. So probably, I would say, the most important reason to do something on the GAP, of course we all want a reliable trip, but it's to save lives. It really is. And also provide more options, travel options and mobility. So these are the things that we looked at. We actually, during the PEL process, we looked at over 100 alternatives, ranging from heavy rail, ranging from many, many different options as to what would best meet those, meet the purpose and need. And some of those things we had to screen out. Obviously, heavy rail, it would be in the billions of dollars. We don't have that kind of money to be able to provide that kind of option, but it's something we definitely look at as part of what we can do to improve the future of the I-25 corridor. So what we're looking at is widening it by 1 lane in each direction and significantly expanding the shoulders, which will help a great deal with safety improvements. So the question is, how do we operate that extra lane? And here are the 4 main things we've been looking at. One is making that extra lane a general purpose lane, and that would operate like the 2 lanes that you have today. It would be free. Another option is making that lane in each direction, 1 lane in each direction, an express lane, so that in exchange for a variable toll, you would take that lane and you would get a reliable trip. So that is how that would work. The other 2 general purpose lanes would remain free. There would always be a choice, but similar to US 36, this is how that option would operate. Then you would have 1 peak. Another thing we looked at is 1 peak period shoulder lane, similar to what we have on the I-70 Mountain Corridor going eastbound. And that's only operated during peak travel times, and we looked at that as well, too. We also looked at 2-lane combinations, 4 lanes, maybe 3 general purpose lanes, and making the other lane an express lane. And so we found that the 2+ lane combination and adding the 1 express lane, those were the options that we were looking at what is going to best meet the purpose and need. The 2-lane combination, I mean, widening it by 2 lanes in each direction, we don't have the funding for that. We really don't. And if we were to go in that direction, it would delay the acceleration of this project. So we are on quite an aggressive schedule to begin construction on the gap by the end of the year, but we have to complete the environmental assessment of the project. And we also, even though we have identified funding, we have to have all that funding secured. But we are optimistic about this, and we're moving forward, and we want to have the project ready should all those funding sources come together for this project. But in order for us to provide some relief, right now, what our analysis is showing is that the 1 express lane in each direction would best meet the purpose and need of this project. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nick.
Thanks, Tamara. Good afternoon. I'm Nick Farber with the Colorado High Performance Transportation Enterprise. I'm the operations manager. I've been with the Colorado HPT since 2011. I was the project manager on US 36, I-25 Central project, helped out with Central 70, the C470 project as well. So HPT is we're a division of CDOT, but we're a little different than CDOT. So we are, since we're a division, but we're governed by our own board. So we have 7 board members. 4 are appointed by the governor from the Dr. Cogga region, the North Front Range MPO near Fort Collins, I-70 Mountain Corridor, and then the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments as well. And then we have 3 transportation commissioners appointed by the chair of the Transportation Commission. And Rocky Scott from this area actually sits on the HPT board as well. We are the innovative finance think tank, toll operations, our express lanes operations division of CSAT. That's kind of what we do. So we enter into public-private partnerships. So we're in a public-private partnership on US 36 and Central 70. Since we're an enterprise, we can do toll. We can enter into public long-term borrowing, so we can toll. We can enter into bonds, things like that. It's because we're an enterprise. That's a little background on us. But I was just wondering. Then I'll just get into the slides. Yes.
Correct me. By law, CDOT cannot collect money, and so that's the reason the enterprise is correct. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, CDOT cannot toll, but HPT
can I ask
can.
a question as well, please? Is your organization a governmental organization, or is it a private organization partnered with the governmental organization?
No, we're a governmental. So an enterprise is a government-owned business under the Colorado Constitution, under the Tabor amendment to the Constitution, Colorado. Not necessarily so we're not a nonprofit. It's just we're a division of CDOT. But the one we have enterprise status. So 90% of the revenue we get has to come from revenue we raise ourselves, and we do that through tolls and through borrowing. And 10% can come from the state. So that's the kind of catch with enterprises. So that's what makes us different than CDOT. And we're governed by our own board. So now I'll go into the slides. So this shows a very general concept of how the lanes would function over time. If we built 2 general purpose lanes, what the traffic would be. So blue, green, and yellow are a very comfortable drive. Orange, red is traffic building, and red is current conditions, and the dark red is conditions worse than today. So, I mean, you see on the far left the 2 general purpose lanes, which are free lanes. The conditions now are pretty bad. 3 general purpose lanes over time, it would start well, but over time it would degrade. Then you just lose that reliable travel time. But with the tolled express lane, you always have reliable travel time. You see, it's always in the blue, green, or yellow, which is kind of current conditions right now. By federal law, the federal regulations through FHWA, we are required to maintain an average speed of 45 miles an hour on that lane. So when we do that, we manage that speed through tolling. So what we have here is kind of a rendition of what the gap looks like now. 2 lanes in either directions, narrow shoulders, rough pavement, inadequate wildlife crossings, and I mean, as Tamara was saying, numerous accidents, almost 1 per day. Accidents, after the improvements, I'll get to you after this. After improvements, nearly double the pavement size. You'll have wide shoulders. You'll have 2 free general purpose lanes, improved wildlife crossings. You'll have and I'll kind of go into what on the next slide on what kind of do a deep dive on what the express lanes are, and technological improvements in the corridor as well. So let me just go to the next slide, and I'll take your question.
No, I can hold it till the end.
Okay.
Whatever, I don't want to disrupt you, so whatever suits you as a presenter, so.
Okay. If we hold to the end, I think.
That'll work.
So if you take a closer look on what the corridor will look like with the express lane, you have the shoulder on the outside shoulder. You have 2 free general purpose lanes, which will always be free. You have the 4-foot buffer between the general purpose lanes and the express lane, which is a variable toll set to maintain that 45 miles an hour, as I said before. It provides a reliable travel time. Research shows from around the country that people, they don't use it every single day. They use it because, I'm late to a meeting. I'm late. I got to get home for my son's soccer practice. Or the big one is that we found out a lot over the country and in the Denver metro area, a daycare charges you a penalty if you're late to pick up your kids from daycare. So I'm going to be late. I'm going to get charged another day if I'm late. So they use the express lane to make it to their child's daycare center on time. Some other things we do to manage the express lane is HOV3. Motorcycles are free per federal law. Limited entry and exit points, so to discourage weaving and to prevent accidents. So I also want to emphasize that this is not a toll road. You always have, like E470, where you're told no matter what if you get on it. You always have the option, the choice, to go in the general purpose lanes and ride for free. That's that. So this is kind of what it looks like altogether. This is what US 36 looks like right now, what I-25 North looks like, and what C-470 will look like in the future. You have the inside shoulder for disabled vehicles, law enforcement, emergency responders, maintenance trucks. You have room for chain up areas, and as again, you have the free general purpose lanes. On the left, you have the buffer, and then you have the express lanes on the inside shoulder. Toll revenues, where the toll revenues go by state statute. Toll revenues have to stay in the corridor. So, but they have to stay. They have to be applied towards operations and maintenance of the toll equipment in the lane, because it's all electronic tolling. It's not. You don't have to stop at a toll booth or at a basket like in Illinois and throw in cash or throw in coins. Either there's a sticker. You have a sticker you can get through E470 that's tied to your account, or you have a license plate toll, and we charge a 25% surcharge on top of the existing toll for you to be charged your license plate toll. So it'll take a picture. There's equipment out there. It takes a picture of your license plate. That picture of your license plate goes back to E470. An actual person then reads your license plate, keys it in into a database, which then goes to the Department of Revenue, and it ties it to your home address, and they send you a bill in the mail. So why do we consider express lanes? Colorado, we just can't build ourselves out of congestion anymore. This is a picture of the T-Rex project through the Denver Tech Center. It was finished in 2006, and it's already over capacity, and there's no reliable trips along the corridor.
It still looks like that.
Yeah. That's a current picture.
It also looked like that when you finished it.
Yeah, true. So, and this will happen on the Gap when if we open it up 3 general purpose lanes. It'll, as I showed you in that first slide, it'll be, relatively free flow conditions in the beginning, but with the growth projected across the whole state, but especially in the Colorado Springs area. I saw a Denver Post article a couple weeks ago that's saying the Colorado Springs area is going to grow by 52% in the next, by 2050. So, in the next 10 years, that general purpose lane will be filled up and there will be no reliable travel time along that corridor. And the Transportation Commission in 2013 adopted a policy that says anytime we add capacity to a corridor, we will consider adding that lane, if at new capacity, as an express lane.
Consider.
So where do we have express lanes in Colorado right now? So as I said, US 36, I know, it's nice. So we have them along US 36 from Denver to Boulder. You can get in I-25 Central and you'll have a toll trip all the way up to Boulder. Tolls depend on the time of day, so it's higher obviously in peak periods when you come in to work in the morning and when you get home at night in the afternoon. I-25, currently we are operating from US 36 to 120th, and the Mountain Express lane, which goes from Empire Junction to the Twin Tunnels. That's a peak period shoulder lane. It's open Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, usually from about 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and it's closed during the week, and it's just a breakdown shoulder. Usually tolls vary on that between $6 and $8. Coming soon on C-470 from Wadsworth to I-25, and from Johnstown to Fort Collins, and on Central 70 from I-25 out to 225. But I want to stress that there's always, on all these corridors, there's always the free option of using the free general purpose lanes. You don't have to use the express lane if you choose not to. So on US 36, that opened in 2015, and travel times are up across all lanes about 30%. Here you see the RTD bus can use it for free, as well if you're HOV3, or if you want a reliable travel time, you can use it, you can pay the toll. And that's, see the sign right there, that shows the toll rate. That's a little bit different than how it is on I-25. That's the price between exits. On I-25 North, we charge a through trip. So from US 36 to 120th, there's numerous exits along that stretch of the road, but we priced it one price to encourage through trips and to discourage weaving and to prevent accidents along the corridor. This stretch of US 30, the stretch of US 36 actually sees 20 to 25% more traffic than the gap, but the gap will actually grow to US 36 traffic conditions within 10 years. And then, as I said, on the Mountain Express lanes, we've reduced travel times on the eastbound up to 52% on the Martin Luther King holiday weekend, which is usually the busiest weekend of the year. Usually, before we added the peak period shoulder lane, traffic, the corridor would just break down at 3,300 vehicles an hour, where it would take you anywhere from 3 to 6 hours to go from Empire to the Twin Tunnels. Now we're routinely getting 4,800 cars an hour through at free flow. The general purpose lanes are a little bit slower, probably around 45, 50, and the express lanes are going about 65, 70. I think that's it. That's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have about the express lanes we have and how they might work or things like that.
Okay, so if I may, Tom, please. So you made a statement. You manage speed on a lane through tolling, and you want to try to maintain an average of 45 is your goal. So if it starts to drop, I assume, but when you say manage, if the speed starts dropping, you start charging people more to be in it. and therefore encouraging people to get out of it so that the speed in that lane continues. Is that right?
That's correct. So federal regulation requires that the feds could remove, we have to get approval by the FHWA to toll. And we have that either through state statute and federal statute. But they said to keep that, to be able to keep tolling that lane, we have to maintain an average speed of 45 miles an hour. And if it drops below that for a certain amount of time, they tell us to raise the toll rate. But before that even gets there, we're watching speeds. And, on all of our corridors, that hasn't happened as of yet. You might see it here and there, but it's not continuous at 45 or below.
Okay, so is there a limit to what you can do? You read these reports of people charging $123 on the East Coast for these tolls on these managed lanes. So do we have a cap on this thing somewhere?
There are no caps, but it's based on, so we base the toll rate off the value, people's value of time. And if you've heard that we went out, and we're doing a traffic and revenue study right now, and we're doing a stated preference survey. So we've gone out and we've done email, we've done phone interviews, online interviews of people, and we say, if you could save this amount of time, would you pay this amount of money? And they ask you a whole bunch of variations on that question, and that figures out people's value of time. That's what we base the toll rate off of. Back east in D.C., where it's the three richest zip codes in the United States, their value of time is through the roof. People don't blink at spending $40 to $60 to save 20, 25 minutes. Here in Colorado, the value of time is much lower. So you'll never see toll rates that high. No, there's no cap, because we have to be able to manage. We have to be able to keep that speed at 45 miles an hour.
Tom, go ahead.
Based on current traffic loads, what do you see as the minimum number of lanes that should be there? Take the tolling concept out of it. What's the minimum number? Is it 3 or 4?
I can't. That's more of an engineering question.
I'm not an engineer, but I can speak on behalf of our project lead on this. What we have learned from our analysis thus far, that 3 lanes would be, just as you're right, let's take whether it's going to be express lane or general purpose lane out of the question, but what would work well on the gap now and into years to come, not into many years to come, would be to add a lane in each direction. But what you also have to keep in mind is we're going to expand the shoulders. As you know, the shoulders are very narrow on the gap. There's hardly any shoulder at all on the inside lane. And so by widening those shoulders, a lot of the delay in the gap is caused by crashes. And then you have a disabled vehicle in the travel lane. And there just isn't safe room to pull those disabled vehicles into a shoulder, and there just isn't the safe room for emergency personnel to do their work. So those expanded shoulders are going to play a very big role in easing congestion along the corridor.
So I guess my frustration is that the actual owners of this road, the people, don't like this concept of tolling because they're saying you're giving us the minimum basic capacity today, and then you're going to charge us to have it be reliable, which we thought the idea of transportation was reliability in the first place. The last time we addressed this, according to your briefing, was 60 years ago that we actually laid down this asphalt before. Given the stress of finances and everything, it's probably going to be 40 years before you address it again. Maybe we should kick the can down the road a couple of years until you can find the money to do it right, rather than doing this. Because you're saying minimum entrance and exit points on this lane, there will be people who will penetrate this no man's land of 4 feet between the 2 lanes, and they'll pass people to get up to the next place they can get. I mean, those are drivers. Those aren't statistics. They're drivers. Mm-hmm. My concern also is in the military. I remember we worked with a personnel program at one point, and no matter what we put in, it always came up with the same answer at the end. And we found out that the algorithm in there had been manipulated such that it didn't make any difference what you put in. The answer was what they wanted. And so I'm a little concerned about this also, that tolls is wonderful. I don't think it's wonderful. And I don't think a lot of people around here that actually have to use this road think it's wonderful. I get concerned because we have an enterprise which puts an administrative burden over the top of this to suck money off of this. Ideally, with 3 lanes, you would have 33% of all the traffic on each of those lanes, but what I've heard is you're expecting 20%, so 80% still stuck on the other 2 lanes. So I'm not sure how we're fixing the problem.
So we typically, we see about, during peak periods, we see about a 20% diversion from the general purpose lane.
So 80%'s on the other 2 lanes yet.
But that's by design, because one, we want to provide a reliable travel time, and we need to provide that guaranteed 45 miles an hour in that lane.
In a 75-mile zone, yeah.
At least 45.
No,
That, I mean, you're going, I know we've hardly, if ever, got that low.
That's true.
Okay, did you get yours answered, Tom?
Yeah.
All right, Tony had his hand up first, and then Reb, and then who else had their hand up? Gene, let me take Joan, and then Gene, and then Dave.
So in your one of your earliest slides, you showed the projections of what happens if you stick with 2 lanes, if you go to 3 lanes, one without managed. Yeah, that. Where's that projection for 4 lanes?
That's a good question.
I mean, if we had a 4th lane, it would be better. But what our engineers would tell you that at least for the next several years, a 4th lane at this point is not needed. But keep in mind that we still are undergoing a PEL process, and that is taking a very hard look at how we can improve the entire I-25 corridor from C-470 south of Denver to Monument, and we're looking at options at a 4th lane. That could be potential for the future. But in order for us to provide relief and to save lives and not waiting, we can do it. It's very possible. It's within our reach by the end of this year, as long as all the funding sources come available. We've got them identified. But as long as they become available, then we can start construction to improve this facility so that for the benefit of safety, travel reliability, and the other things that we have heard from the public that's very important to them.
I can appreciate that. The communications department of every single organization on earth will say that we have to do it for safety. It's for safety, it's for safety, it's for safety. But there's a lot more to this, and your number 1 thing on your list was improving capacity. 3 was safety. Number 3 was safety. So improving capacity is, I think, our number 1 issue here. Your schematic for what it'll look like with the 1 managed lane had a very large shoulder, and I appreciate that. But it looked like there was enough room for 4 lanes just on your plan right there. If we were to keep the same amount of shoulders we have now with a 4th lane, as opposed to just increasing the shoulders. So you said at the beginning, when you were showing the 4 different ways you were looking at it, you were showing with 2 plus more lanes. But then immediately the rest of your presentation took that 4th option out, as if that was not really anything that's being talked about at all anyway, when clearly that's going to be a necessity in the next 10 years. You're saying it yourself. Sure.
Well, a lot of options, a lot of alternatives were looked at during the PEL, like heavy rail, which would be wonderful, but it's just so cost prohibitive. Sure. And then during that process, there's a screening out of, well, what are the funding sources that would be available? That in order for us to do an environmental assessment, we have to have identified funding to be able to deliver a project before we can get to this point. Oh. So we've got $350 million. That is enough for us to build a 3-lane facility. You do make a good point about the shoulders, and the shoulders will be we are looking at the future as to what we can possibly do with this facility, making the absolute best use of the right-of-way and the capacity that we have. So eventually, when needed, we can add a 4th lane, but if we were to do that next year, we still would have to get additional right-of-way. There would be an additional cost, quite substantial, and it would hold back the project for some time.
Well, you talk about the funding sources. A lot of people in this community, in this county, this city, feel like they were lied to about being the funding source. So, I know our governmental officials have been working with CDOT for quite some time to try and make this happen, and they came up with what they believed, they were led to believe was a good plan to get that third lane with not the expectation it was going to be a managed lane. So when you go after those funding sources in a deceptive manner, I don't think that's helping your argument at all. Anyway, the other thing on managed lanes here now, we're talking about you're going to raise the price on it as volume goes up. Where is that money actually going? I know the enterprise gets the money, but what does that money actually do for us, the people who own the road, as Tom said, and the people who have to use the road? What does that do for us?
First, the rates are just not increased willy-nilly. They're actually, the HPT board approves the toll rate schedule on each corridor that we operate. And it's variable by time of day, so it's not ever changing. It's not going to be something different tomorrow as it was yesterday. So just want to clarify that. Where do the toll revenues go? Right now on the corridors that HPT operates, they go towards toll collection costs. It costs us money to contract with E470 to be our back office tolling services provider. They employ people that answer phone calls, do the license plate tolling, and then they run the license plate tag as well. It also goes towards the maintenance of the equipment on the lane. So there's the readers, there's the cameras. People have to go out and clean them, make sure they're clean on a regular basis. And there's loops in the ground, make sure they're working there. So there's a loop before, it knows a car's coming, so it knows to kind of then read if a car either takes a picture or reads your sticker tag. And as well as we pay for all operations, then it pays for all maintenance of the lane itself. So, stuff like crack filling, potholes, someone hits a guardrail, things like that. Snow removal, snow and ice removal, we pay for all of that. On the express lanes itself. We can't, since we're an enterprise, we can't give money to CDOT. But we can borrow money from CDOT, and we could probably loan money to CDOT. But since the Tabor enterprise issue, there's issues with that. If there's excess revenue, that revenue has to then go towards improvements on the corridor. Like on I-25 North, we are we're doing some safety improvements along the corridor. We're going to pay for additional CSP enforcement along the corridor, and things like that. So that's what the excess revenue goes towards.
So from what I'm hearing is the number one reason for the money is to pay for taking the money.
No,
that was the number one thing you said, was to pay for the system itself.
That's a portion of it.
And so then we also on I-20 on the Mountain Express lane, that project wouldn't have been done, that we were short, CDOT was short $25 million. We went out to the market, and Bank of America loaned us $25 million. So those toll revenues are actually pledged to the repayment of that loan. That got the project done. Same with I-25 North Segment 3 from 120th to E470. Right. We have a $23 million loan on that.
In speaking to constituents here, I've found that most of them would be okay with a managed lane if that was the purpose of the managed lane, was to recoup the money for building it, and then it went away after it was paid for. That I don't think people would have a problem with, not as much of a problem with. But to perpetrate its own existence does not make a whole heck of a lot of sense.
Okay, so let me just inject here just a second. The purpose of this briefing and having these folks come down was to let us know how the enterprise division of CDOT works and what the tolling would be going for. So, but let's let's try to make sure that we don't go too far and make accusations, not picking on you, Tony, but deceptive and stuff. But there's no one in here, in my opinion, and as chair of the committee, that we weren't there. We're staff. These are all professional staff. And so I don't think that there's a difference of opinion between politicians about what was done and what was signed and this, that, or another. Unless you were in the room or have read the documents, I don't think any of us can really comment on that with any credibility. So I want to give everybody a chance to ask their questions and speak their stuff, but let's not get into accusations that we can't substantiate. Okay, so Reb, did he cover yours?
No. Would you go back to the chart, the yellow, orange, green, right there? If I'm reading that chart correctly, that says by the year 2031, we go from dark yellow to orange. So that's not good, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the investment in, bear with me, and I'm just using round numbers, that's approximately 10 years life out of a $350 million project. I experienced T-Rex personally, okay? And when I say that, what would it cost us, and I'm not sure that you want to talk dollars or years, it's taken us 60 years to figure out we've got to change what we've got in the gap. We have a need. Forget whether it's 2 plus 1 or 3 plus 1 or 4, I don't care how you describe it. If you, quote, kick the can down the road for approximately 25 years based on some people's, and I'm not quoting them specifically, but some people's estimate, we should have been dealing with this 25 years ago. My point is, if it's going to cost us, for the sake of discussion, 10 years to get 4 lanes, at what expense are we paying for that 10 years, getting it 10 years earlier? Not just in lives or money, but primarily money, which is now an issue for any construction. We can't do anything until we figure out where the funds come from. That's come from your people. I know it for a fact, public money. I can't promise you that we're going to build 4 lanes unless we've got the money tagged for it. And just a few years ago, a former administration decided we had shovel-ready roads. We didn't have any shovel-ready roads in this country, period, or infrastructure, because nobody knew where the money was coming from. And I guess my question is, does this make sense economically to spend $350 million for a 10-year improvement? Or actually, yeah, it's about a 10-year improvement. I think the estimate is it would be finished in 2021, right? Starting this.
We've got 2 years, I believe.
But that's also.
It would start at the end of 2018, and I believe the construction duration is pretty aggressive, about 2 years. 2018. 20 to 2021, yeah.
So basically, you gain 10 years additional lifespan, but then we'll be kicked to the back of the line for all the other projects that are there.
We're going to be waiting another 30 years.
I'm sorry?
We're going to wait another 30 years.
You may be kicked down the road for another 50 years just because you got a 10-year head start. That's my perception.
I'm Aaron Greco with CDOT Policy Office. I think you can speculate. Right now it's a priority to try and fix this section of the project. There's a larger project area that needs to be fixed. But, you can only speculate as to, how does it become prioritized after the fact. A lot of questions out there about what kind of new revenue is going to come into the system. Will something else go to the voters? Is President Trump going to follow through on his infrastructure plan pledge? Are there any number of different things? This area and your RTA in particular has been very aggressive about making sure to come up with revenue to take care of your system. And others might follow suit, and they might do like you are doing and match on state projects. It's really hard to predict what that's going to look like in the future. But theoretically, yes, if you took care of this section and then you took care of the larger project, and a lot of questions on what that looks like, somebody else's priority could get bumped up next. That's true.
Okay, on my list, Joan, you were next, and then Jean.
Okay. Earlier you had said that it was policy to consider the express lane. So consider to me is not mandatory, but to consider. Yet in this presentation, there has been no other option that could be weighed to discuss contrasting comparisons between the toll versus the non-toll. It just, I mean, I'm from the East Coast. I've driven a lot of toll roads, sure know them. But I don't see how having a toll lane, which you're hoping will have a 20% capacity, is going to really further address the safety concerns of the other 80% of the people in the other two lanes. Then you talk about the reliability. You know, it's got to be this 45-mile-an-hour limit. Well, if it's snow or ice on the roads, you know, the speeds are going to be the same all the way across. You know, if the road conditions are such, just because you're in a toll lane, you're not going to be able to go any faster than would be safer than it's there. You know, what happens if funding falls short? You know, and if you raise the amount of toll money that you're looking to raise for the toll to maintain that that lane, what then happens to what's the impact on the other two lanes for maintenance? It just seems to me, and from what I've been reading in the paper and going to other hearings, that there is no other option being considered, that this is going to be an express lane, that it is fait accompli and decision's been made. And I'm just concerned as to why we're going through these sessions when it seems as rather apparent to me that the decision's been made.
I'd like to answer one of your questions, and then Nick may be able to clarify the safety issue. As I said, we are in the environmental assessment stage of this, and so what that means is we have to document all of the impacts, the environmental impacts of widening the roadway. And also, what we will be evaluating is what is the best use of that additional lane. We will be further evaluating an express lane, and also further evaluating a general purpose lane as part of our environmental assessment. CDOT does believe, based on analysis and experience and also the policy that we're working under, we do believe that an express lane would best meet the project's purpose and need, particularly when it comes to travel reliability over the long term. But with that said, during our environmental assessment, we are taking a deep dive on both of those options. And we'll have those results in April, and probably toward the end of April, I would say. And we will be presenting that information to the public during a formal public hearing where the public can study the results of it. They can come to a public hearing. We're not sure how many we're going to have at this point, and then people can present their comments publicly in front of everyone.
So in regards to safety, in the next day or so, we're releasing some information that shows that accidents on US 36 between July 1st of last year and December 31st of last year actually gone down 33% because of increased enforcement on the lane. So, you know, because the lane looks like you have the inside shoulder, room for the State Patrol, local law enforcement, emergency responders, you have that room, and you have local law enforcement and CSP out there, we've actually seen incidents drop by a third. And because the operator along the corridor has actually increased enforcement along the corridor, and we're doing that elsewhere as well on the Mountain Express Lane. We're looking to do that on the Mountain Express Lane and on I-25 North as well. So it's and with and as I said here, we've seen general purpose lane speeds go up 30% since the opening of the express lane in 2015. So all lanes benefit, not just people who choose to pay the toll to get that reliable travel time. All lanes benefit from adding the express lane.
Several questions. I'll try to be brief and to the point. And their questions, mostly clarifications. First off, from over here, despite having good vision in classes, I can't read the eye test chart. So can we get a copy of the presentation? Yes. Rick and have him disseminate it to the committee. Secondly, looking at the eye test chart, it appears to me that if I heard things correctly in the discussions before me, assuming that we start the project on time, it completes in approximately 2021, and at the time of completion, the service level on the general purpose lanes is level C, which means there's times during the day when the traffic flow is impeded. 1 year later, it drops to service level D, and unless things have changed from the East-West Mobility Study years, service level D is failing. So we're going to get 1 year of C-level service on the general purpose lanes before it reaches a capacity that begins failing at service level D. And it stays at service level D for several years and then finally goes to F when the capacity of those two lanes is exceeded. Whereas the 3 general purpose lanes gives a service level C for an additional 4 to 6 years, depending upon what the chart says, and I'm not certain of the dates from over here. So it seems to me that, yes, we have 20% of the traffic that is going to have good service levels, and the cost of driving in that lane will escalate as the service level goes down on the general purpose lanes. But bottom line is that within 1 year of completion, we're at service level D on the general purpose lanes. We're not improving things dramatically in terms of transportation along the corridor. That's my comment. Second, how do we prevent weaving to avoid the tolls?
Yeah, we have law enforcement out there, so to prevent weaving.
We don't have law enforcement out there today.
That's why I mentioned when you have the extra wide shoulders on the inside and the outside, you provide room for law enforcement and for emergency responders. On the US 36, we actually have carve-outs. They're kind of, so the median kind of goes up like this. We have carve-outs like this where we have CSP and local law enforcement can sit safely and not
That may deter it, but it won't prevent it. What prevents the weaving so that they avoid the tolls? Nothing as far as
people are going to weave, but that's why we have law enforcement out there at peak periods, because that's when people do weave. When traffic is highest and they see the brake lights up ahead, they either want to get in or they go, oh, here comes my exit, and they want to get out. That's why we have active law enforcement out there as well.
corollary to the toll road or the tolling on the Gap segment. When 25 was widened from South Castle Rock north into the C470 area, why wasn't the toll road implemented in that segment, since the traffic volume goes up markedly at Castle Rock due to the number of people living there and driving north into the Denver area? Why wasn't that considered and implemented there to find out what kind of processes, what it would do, and how it would impact traffic flows on that corridor? It seems like that was the perfect alternative, and it doesn't make sense to me that you would toll the Gap and then drop the tolls at Castle Rock?
That's a good question. I'll try my best to answer it. So as far as Castle Rock, the improvements that were made there and also the improvements that were made north of Colorado Springs, those were made before the Transportation Commission adopted their policy for us to strongly consider when we're widening a major corridor, highly traveled corridor like I-25, we need to consider using or when we're adding a lane, making that a managed lane. And it wasn't just they added a policy to add a policy. This was based on our experience from other projects, such as T-Rex, and also based on some of the successes we've seen with other projects, such as US 36. US 36 is a lot more congested on a regular basis than the I-25 gap. I drive it regularly, and I have been on US 36 during crashes, and I've been on US 36 when the traffic is heavy, but I will say from personal experience, the traffic moves much better than it did when it was just a two-lane road in each direction. So that's why the Transportation Commission made that policy, because just adding capacity over the long term is not going to best solve, it may not be the ideal solution, but it's not going to best solve the transportation issues.
Is there any discussion to convert the extra capacity from Castle Rock northbound into a toll road?
I don't believe you can convert an existing lane into a managed lane. I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, it's very difficult. We can, but it's difficult.
The last question that I have is, who are the organizations that comprise the board that oversees the toll rates?
The HPTE board oversees the toll rates.
Who are the organizations that are members to that board?
So it's a member, they're appointed by there's 4 members appointed by the governor, one from the Dr. Cog region, one from the North Front Range MPO region, the Fort Collins area, Loveland area, one from the I-70 Mountain Corridor, and one from this region. And then we also have 3 appointed by the governor, but appointed by the Transportation Commissioner, Chair of the Transportation Commission, excuse me. And Rocky Scott, the Transportation Commissioner from this region, sits on our board. Currently, the Pikes Peak board member is vacant. Our last board member from the region, I think, had to resign a couple months ago, so we're actively looking for a new board member.
Let me try to ask his question differently. The first part, are those representatives from those 4 regions that are appointed by the governor private industry, or are they politicians or from elected officials?
They're private citizens.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they are not representing the Home Builders Association or the paving committee or some stuff. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Not that I'm aware of. I personally know the board members very well, and they're all upstanding. I mean, the governor's not going to, I mean, in my opinion, I guess, appoint people who like that to our board. So they're very upstanding members.
David, you had a comment.
I don't know where to start. other than I agree with everything that's been said from the PPRTA group. PPRTA has been, I think, probably a good model for some other parts of the country, or it's the county and the state, as far as how we collect money, what we do with the money, how we manage the money, and so forth. And the other gentleman, said that other places are looking at that, and I think realistically, where some of the rub comes from is that we were trying to help seed money for this gap, and in our wildest dream, I don't think anybody in this room thought the term managed lane or toll lane would come up. So there's some difficulty there from the committee as far as we try to do and be transparent to the voters as far as what we do with the money and so forth, and that kind of is rubbing the voters wrong. And I think that if you all are going to look at anything down the road and other things, then it needs to be brought forward initially when you start asking a PPRTA group for seed money or something like that, or if they offer seed money, don't turn it around into a toll. That being said, when you do a sales presentation, you always say up to. Now you say up to 29%. 29% is an awful finite number that you came up with. What is the realistic average you think it's going to increase speed?
Like miles per hour, or what are you talking about?
Well, I'm going by what your presentation was, is up to 29% faster. What is that? I mean, average, how much faster is it realistically going to be? It's not going to be 29%.
No, it's during peak periods. It's 29% faster than it was when there was just 2 free lanes that were just clogged.
And that one lane?
No, there was 2 general purpose lanes. So before it looked just like what you see at the top. US 36 looked just like that up top. Traffic conditions the same, bumper to bumper, low speeds, unreliable travel times.
So this 29%, let me rephrase it, 29% is your max. What is your low and what is your median?
I don't know. I could find out, but
well, I would think that since that's what your enterprise does, you would have some idea.
Well, I mean,
hope.
Speeds are, I've driven the corridor numerous times, and even I drove it during the peak period up to Boulder in December, mid-December, and the general purpose lanes were going, I was in the general purpose lanes, and I went into the express lane, and I was going 55, and I was probably going 35 in the general purpose lanes.
And the other part of this is the toll. Listen to some of the presentation. You'd mentioned something about it's going to be a toll for everybody to use and so forth. But if it's a one-time person who's trying to get, because their babysitter is going to charge them extra, or they're going to be late, or whatever, so they're typically not going to be the population that's going to have the toll tag and so forth. And what you said was that if they jump into this toll lane or managed lane, as you put it, and they're not participating in a toll tag or something, they're going to be charged 25% more than the toll?
Yeah, because to pay someone that actually then looks at the picture, to pay for the access to the database that the Department of Revenue provides, there's a charge to that from E470. So
that's already in existence on 470.
We're just recouping. Yeah, and E470 does the exact same thing. So it actually just recoups our costs. We're not making anything off of it. Just recoups our costs.
Part of where I'm going with that is since obviously from what you've talked about, you know what your maintenance costs are as far as people wiping cameras, maintaining the road, da-da-da-da-da. What is the toll going to be, do you think?
I don't know. Right now we're in the middle of a traffic and revenue study on the corridor. So we did it, as I said, we did the stated preference survey that was out from after Thanksgiving through the beginning of the year. So one of our consultants is compiling that data right now. They do sophisticated traffic modeling along the corridor. That all kind of goes into a model that, and they, based on the value of time from that stated preference survey, they feed that into the model.
So we have all this information and you don't know what the toll is going to be?
Yeah, not yet, no. This is based on, we want to, one, base it off so we can get the price for the reliable travel time, and two, that meets people's the value of time that will provide the reliable travel time.
Then the next, I think the other thing is it's going to be a can of worms. I do not, in my wildest dreams, see how you're going to take toll money that's going to be specifically for that lane, maintain that lane, resurface that lane, and so forth, but yet these other 2 lanes have no real revenue funding. We can't even expand it now. So and then when you do snow removal, and you said it, is that you take money and you pay for snow removal. You're going to do snow removal on the express lane, but CDOT's not going to be doing, well, it won't be CDOT because they're not the enterprise. they would be doing the
But
other
we
part of
pay-
it? So you got two different snowplow companies?
No, we don't. Actually, CDOT does it all for us. So we just pay CDOT so they charge to a different cost center when they plow the express lane. So CDOT does it all. So we don't pay. There's not two companies out there doing it. So
How do you do maintenance then? Same way?
Yep. So CDOT crews do it. CDOT.
All right, Rick.
Right. I mean, I think it goes from like 25 cents in off-peak per exit to, I think it's like $4.50. But I think to go from Boulder, if I remember correctly, to go from downtown Denver to Boulder, I think it's like, I'd have to look it up. I think it's like $12.
That used to be a toll road way back when.
Yep.
And then when, as we mentioned earlier, when the toll road was paid for, then the toll booth came down.
Mhm.
That's a lot more palatable than an ongoing checkbook.
The problem is, it filled back up again, right?
Yep.
Problem is, it shows it's going to back up anyway.
But we,
With 18 miles, what might be the maximum charge for a one-way trip with 18 miles? Based on speculating relative to 36 miles.
the 36 is a different corridor than I-25 South. I wouldn't feel comfortable just throwing out a number and then having it be completely different in a couple of months when the traffic and revenue study's down.
Okay, so I want to give everybody an opportunity. Again, this was supposed to be an informative session, but I would like to add a comment that disturbs me. And when I worked at headquarters at Division of Wildlife, I traveled back and forth to 58th and Broadway every day. And I've driven that corridor to Boulder many, many times. My most recent experience several months ago. Off-peak period on that road is nothing compared to the traffic volume on I-25 every minute of every day. It goes up and down, moving people from one place to the other in rush hour periods. But the off-peak period of that, there's hardly anybody on it in certain stretches. My experience, limited. You guys live in that area. Some people drive it frequently. But I find, unless you're comparing as an example of what a tolling section of road would look like and operate, comparing that route to I-25, a major north-south interstate route through the middle of the country, there's no comparison, in my opinion, to the kind of traffic, not just the cars, but the heavy trucks, the commercial transportation on that I-25 corridor. And from when they widened that gap from Castle Rock, they didn't add a lane. They added 2 and 3 lanes in some places. And Lincoln Avenue exit, you used to have to merge. Now you can go straight to Castle Pines and you can just zip down there. And I took advantage of all that for a long time. But I just find that if you're not clear in your comparison of what you're comparing, people that live here and drive back and forth, and if they're familiar with both of those corridors, in my opinion, there's no comparison in terms of the volume and the kind of traffic. If you're comparing it as what a toll section of road would look like and operate, I get it. But not when you're comparing Boulder traffic moving to Denver and Denver moving to Boulder and an I-25 north-south route. Just that comparison and how you make that comparison or what you're comparing bothers me.
I think we're using 36 as an example of what the gap will look like in time. I mean, as I said, the volumes on 36 are 20 to 25% higher than the gap now, but the gap is going to be there in 10 years. And so I think that was one of the points I made earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Scott.
I just want to, I'm someone who is a traffic engineer. I kind of know how some of this stuff works. CDOT and the cities and the counties are being asked to provide safe roads for more and more traffic with diminishing resources to do it. And it's forcing engineers to come up with new and innovative ways to try to handle traffic. And if you're going to invest a large amount of money, you want to see it last for as long as possible. While I may not like paying tolls, I also realize it's pretty unrealistic that gas taxes or any other revenue source are going to get raised anytime soon. It hasn't been raised in 20 plus years at either the state or federal level. Much like we came up with some unique interchange designs for I-25 and Fillmore versus what had originally been proposed, which we couldn't afford to build. Same thing with the Academy Union intersection. It's a funky configuration that people came up with because the original preferred alternative was you couldn't fund it. So I actually countered everybody else here. I'm appreciative of CDOT and its consultants coming up with some innovative ideas to try to solve the problem as soon as possible versus saving up to build a general purpose lane or a general purpose lane plus a toll lane. And how many more hours are we going to be stuck in traffic and crashes are we going to have? You know, just widening the shoulders alone sometimes can improve your traffic flow because the narrower the shoulders are, the slower people want it. They don't feel as comfortable. So I actually appreciate what you're trying to do, and I just want you to get some positive feedback from somebody. It doesn't sound like you're going to get it elsewhere. But thank you. I appreciate what you guys are trying to do.
Have you?
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I appreciate it too, but it's kind of like Jim is saying. There's got to be some other option. I mean, if nothing else, you know how many cars travel down that road. If nothing else, if we need 4 lanes 10 years from now or 20 years from now, say, okay, you know what? We can do 10 cents a toll for all lanes, and in 5 years you're going to have 4 lanes. I mean, it's another option.
Did you finish your presentation?
I did, yes.
I want to take the target off your chest. Jennifer, do you like to comment? You're part of the I-25 Gap Coalition, right?
Jennifer Irvin, County Engineer. Just a couple things I just wanted to mention. First of all, the other thing that was kind of mentioned but was not really gotten to was, in addition to the fatalities that we've had, we had 2 law enforcement fatalities on that corridor. And having recently, here within the last week, had that within our own community as well, I think one of the things to keep in mind is how important those law enforcement personnel and the safety of those law enforcement personnel as they keep us safe are. And so just one of the things, and safety is down third on that list, but I think from an engineer who is responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of our community, and I think Commissioner Waller has said it as well, the safety of our community is paramount in making sure that as whatever decision is made on this corridor, that we move that along and make our community as safe as possible. CDOT here talked a lot about tolls, and somebody pointed that out. And part of the issue is to get you informed about the tolls, because nobody really has a lot of questions about the general purpose lanes, but everybody has a question about the tolls. So I think that, the question was, why is that geared toward? It's because, I think that they're trying to answer those questions, or at least educate and make you aware of those. And then thirdly, please don't believe what's in the paper. Please don't believe what's in the paper. I think CDOT is going through the process. The project is going through the process. Probably at the end of this, or maybe CDOT has information on how you can participate and to be involved. And this is a good forum, but please get your comments on the record through either those public meetings that there's town halls, but please be informed about those opportunities for the public comment, those comments that go on the record, and make sure that that is accounted for so that these folks have that. In addition to that, our commissioners are looking to host a couple of public meetings. That information will be out to you, And then lastly, I just want to thank CDOT. This is not easy, right? And what we were looking at 3 or 4 years ago was a 10-year window to do anything on this corridor. And here we are, whether it's 3 general purpose lanes or 2 general purpose lanes and a toll lane, I think that we're going to get some improvements to relieve and do some of those safety, and I think that that's very important to recognize that CDOT has, and their partners and many other people have made the commitment to move this project along as quickly as possible. I look back to our Woodman Road project. That environmental assessment took 10 years to get completed. We are looking at 2 years and to try and get something to construction. So whether you like or don't like the toll lanes, I don't have an opinion because we don't have all the data yet, but I think it's important to recognize that CDOT is doing everything possible to improve the safety of our community, and I think that they need to be applauded for that.
Thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
Sure.
What information was wrong in the media? What was wrong?
We could have a whole meeting on that.
This is a legitimate question. What information did the media get wrong?
I think that the mainstream media really has done a pretty good job covering this. I'd have to do a deeper I'm sorry. I think that your mainstream media, what I mean by that are your television stations, your commercial stations. I think the Gazette, from what I've seen, I haven't captured everything, but what I've read from the mainstream media, I think they've done a pretty good job of covering this. We've got a lot of social media interaction, and sometimes that can make it to the mainstream media. Social media is social media, as you know.
That's different than
It is.
saying don't believe the media.
Yeah. I'm not, CDOT, what I'm saying, no, what I said is, do not believe everything you read. No. No, I said, oh, no.
Okay.
Oh, okay, well, I'm going to restate that. I said don't believe, I mean, don't believe.
Statement to make it a public venue. I'm kind of amazed.
Okay. Point taken, thank you. Jennifer, thank you for that additional and bringing us back to the purpose of what we're here. And that was, I want to thank Tamara, Nick, and Aaron for your time. This came from an initial discussion about not understanding what the enterprise was about and how that money was to be used and how it was to be collected. And so I think you've been informative. You've also given us an update on some of the numbers in this test and why the surveys and the opinions are leaning in the direction they're leaning. But I think you do get from here and from the listening sessions, from what I've read, people are generally not happy with the idea of a toll lane. But be it what it is, we think we've given our share and maybe more than our share for a 1.95 mile section of roadway. Then I don't see or hear other communities stepping up to the plate like we have to make this happen. And so I think the voice of the people in the community taken to a ballot show that we want something done, and we want it done sooner than later. And if this is a stopgap measure and it buys us a couple of years to other folks to get off their can and do something about it, then I guess we'll have to take what we get. But I do want to thank you for coming down and sharing your information. Sorry for making you a target, but you ought to be used to this by now. As I said in the military, it doesn't hurt anymore. You're biting on scar tissue. So anyway, but I do want to thank you all very much for your time, and enjoy your drive back through the gap. Okay. Thank you all for your participation in that. Okay, so maintenance of effort reports. Rick, do you want to?
I'm going to save the presentation really quick.
Okay.
So I can send it to you.
All right. He's going to save the presentation so we can get it out to us, so just bear with us while she does that.
service level projections by year.
All right, she's got the presentation saved, so let's try to get back and wrap this up. Okay, Larry, thank you.
Okay, item 7B, maintenance of effort reports. They're in your packet. We have a couple of member governments here to make presentations if you have questions. Just as a reminder, in the establishing IGA back from August of 2004, before the ballot in November 2004, there was the maintenance of effort provision that was put in there, which stated it's the intent that for the applicable categories, which is road maintenance for all member governments and transit for City of Colorado Springs, that they should not reduce their own non-PPRTA funding from the 2004 level, the pre-PPRTA level. They should not reduce that because they're getting this new money from PPRTA. So each of the 5 member governments have submitted the documents that are in your packet. Historically, the CAC has made a recommendation pro or con, and as you probably know from those of you who have been here for several years, there were some thumbs down on City of Colorado Springs because they did go below their 2004 pre-RTA level in transit out of their non-RTA funding, but they've now, it appears from my reading, and it now appears that they've come back up to the 5.7 million that was the city's 2004 non-RTA transit revenue out of the city's budget. So it appears now that they've met that. They're back up to the 5.7 million from 2004.
And $17,896. Gene, I'll get you a question just a second. Is there anyone that feels the need to have the communities make a presentation to the letter that's in the packet? Okay, Gene, you had a question?
Unfortunately, I left the document at home while I was researching before I left. I don't have it in front of me. But this morning, when I was reviewing the package, I don't find any information in here on the City of Colorado Springs funding levels that reflects the SIP funding that was in the city budget from 2004 to 2008 that was used to directly fund city maintenance projects for roadways.
Mike, you want to, SIP funding is still in the budget, right? I mean, because Corey reported on SIP funding.
Yes, and I don't recall the exact numbers. I think, the maintenance effort was based on the attachment that you see here. That's how we used it originally, and it was, a lot of the salaries and staffing, and so that's kind of been the level, the maintenance efforts. That's what we've been basing on. SIP funding, I ballpark, I remember we had about $8 million in paving and stuff. But one of the things that this doesn't reflect is we are putting in $50 million through the 2C. So I think from a maintenance of effort, I think we're exceeding even the 04 numbers.
Gene, let me see if I can, and Rick, step in and correct me, but the categories of expenses that are listed here were the categories that existed in 2004. There are more categories and additional funding that contribute to maintenance, but in terms of a level of effort, they were comparing apples to apples, current funding as compared to what was in those categories in 2004. Is that right, Rick? I thought we had this discussion one time before that there were some missing categories when we compare it to the budget, and I just gray matters. Okay, go ahead.
Within the SIP category, first, it's very difficult to find details on that on the city website and has been for 10 years or more. But prior to 2004, there was approximately $2 million per year in SIP funding that the city has told us previously in this forum it was used for materials used in roadway repair, replacement, maintenance projects. That money disappeared out of the SIP budget in 2008 and has not been put into the SIP budget since, as far as I can tell. I won't tell you that that's definitive because I may have missed it. It is difficult at best to find it. But SIP funding for the streets department was in place at the time PPRTA was passed. And it was in place providing funding to the streets department prior to PPRTA. And it seems to me that we may be trying to get an apples to apples comparison on funding, but when you throw out what amounts to about $8 million or more in funding that went directly to streets maintenance, we don't have an apples to apples comparison.
But we're still meeting the letter of intent, or the maintenance of effort.
If there's $8 million in the level of effort, it's roughly over 4 years, it's not reflected in what their funding levels were.
I guess we'll have to ask. Can you help us?
I look into that, but again, the maintenance of effort is based on what you see here, and there's been other changes. I agree. There's been a lot ups and downs, but this is this was the criteria that was set that we were supposed to meet, and we've shown every year we met it except for a few years of the transit, and even this year and going into 18, we're actually above the 5.7. Looks like we're going to be funding 6.2 million. So we've, said we've met our maintenance of effort, as far as I can tell.
Indulge my ignorance, but what does SIP stand for?
Capital improvement.
Projects.
For the city.
Yeah.
Tom?
I'm confused in my own head right now between current year and then year dollars, but after a 14-year period, increase of 40,000 probably means that in current year's buying ability is less money than they had in the budget back in 2004. We don't ever stipulate whether it needs to be inflation adjusted or anything like that. It's just raw dollars, but you can't buy $18 million worth of stuff today with $18 million in 2004 numbers.
That I would agree with that, but the agreement or the understanding is the dollar level was not to drop.
I get it,
to that,
and we missed it.
But I'm still making the same amount of money as I did
I know.
14 years ago.
Yeah.
So
You get the same pay that you did in 2004. I know.
Did you want to say?
No, just Tom finally understood it.
All right. So
I'm sorry I can't answer a whole lot more. Like I said.
okay, we'll see if we can get something, Gene.
A suggestion, Jim, and I want to thank Tom for bringing it up. The fact that none of this is in a current year dollar amount and there's no inflation adjustment is a significant oversight to be able to compare 2004 to 2018. I would suggest that there's two things that need to be done. One is to have a common baseline to compare the dollar amounts in here so that we have a common yardstick and we're not looking at inflated dollars or deflated dollars from 2004 to 14 years later. And the second item is how to address the fact that the comparison fails to recognize that a significant funding stream for maintenance in the city is not reflected in the comparison, which is the capital improvements funding that went to streets.
Okay, I just write numbers down.
Mr. Chair, if we're going to recognize that in our recommendation here, I think we also need to recognize that because of the significant economic downturn in 2008 and 2009 and the inability of the city or the county or any of these governmental organizations to raise their revenue back up since then because of Tabor plays a big factor in this as well. So, we've got a lot of issues that are that are competing with each other there. So yes, you're right. We don't have the same buying power today with 18 million as we did in 2004. However, we also are not at the same level in revenue coming in to any of these governmental organizations as we would be if we didn't have those other issues.
We've had that discussion about the impact. Carlos?
Yeah, and again, it's inflation adjusted. It's my understanding that when it comes to the types of products that the city purchases, like concrete, materials, those kinds of things, really doesn't track the consumer price indexes and so forth. So I just think that that might be something to also consider. Is there something that related to construction costs that the city buys when you buy asphalt and concrete that's actually going to be much higher than, let's say, consumer products? And I just think that should be pointed out. I do understand inflation, but we also have the inflation on construction materials as well. So if we're going to bring that in, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, level of effort implies purchasing power.
That's subject to
Just some process observations. If you, if it is the wish or the will of the board that they want to have it be inflation adjusted on the maintenance of effort, I see two process options.
I'd go to the IGA.
Well, one is the IGA, and one is just a board policy. Board policy is quite easy. IGA is not. You'll probably remember if you want to change one word or one letter in the establishing IGA, it takes a minimum of 2/3 of each and every one of the 5 governing bodies, regardless of attendance at any meeting. For example, the El Paso County Board of County Commissioners, 2/3 of 5 is 4. So a meeting of 3 county commissioners approving a change does not work. They have to have a minimum of 4, and it has to be 2/3 of each and every governing body agreeing to changing one word.
Okay. All right, so I'm struggling with how to take this forward. This is a recommendation. This was information. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. It is a recommendation. So I voice our concerns about buying power and an inflation-adjusted comparison.
Right.
Is that sufficient? A level of detail, and then.
I think so.
Huh?
Mr. Chair, I think that sounds appropriate. I don't know that we can make a recommendation that they change the IGA or change more board policies based on maintenance of effort, but just, something to be aware of. And I'm sure they are aware of it.
And so it's that the lack in our knowledge of the lack of that inflation adjusted comparison between 2004 and now, and the impact on buying power.
Mr. Chair, I would also say that this is probably something that's more realistically handled in PPRTA 3.
Yes.
That sounds very reasonable to me. It can be noted as part of my presentation to the board that there were several members of the committee that noted that while the numbers are the same, the buying power with inflation indices is tremendously gone down. Now, I can say this with reasonable certainty that this is not all of the city's maintenance budgets. It's and that there's a bigger budget than this. I'm pretty sure that we've had this discussion in the past, but we'll try to clarify that going forward. But I think there was somebody that dug into the city budget, like Gene apparently tried to do, and noted that there were categories in the budget that weren't in here. There were some categories in here that weren't in the budget. And I dimly recall in this old gray matter that the budget line item structure, or the line item structure of the budget, had changed during those periods of time, and that some things were combined in with others, and likewise. Now, we'll try to get an answer for that, but I can call Travis and see if we can find out.
More importantly would be is if the city provided information that actually showed what where they spent their money, and I have yet to find anything that shows actuals for budget year. It's just not that I can find on the website, but that may be me, not efficiencies in the city. The budget's a document to deviate from, the actual expenses.
Right. Right. Carlos, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just wanted just a clarification. The 2C money, which is about $60 million, again, why is that not here or excluded? Because we know the city is putting a lot of money in. I would consider 2C a fairly significant maintenance fund, but perhaps I'm characterizing it incorrectly, so can there be some clarification on that component? You were saying that we are spending more money on street maintenance, Colorado Springs, and 2C is a big chunk of $60 million.
But 2C doesn't count towards the maintenance of efforts because it wasn't in existence in 2004.
Oh, okay.
That's,
all right.
That's why I said this list of expense categories that was here was how the budget was broken down in 2004 and was the snapshot of what they were spending in these categories, which when the people, the board or whoever drew the line and says this is the marker, this is how the budget was broken down. And what I'm trying to recall was that your comparisons are noted that the budget today looks different than what this does. But in order to be able to compare that maintenance of effort, they had to try to make this work. I'll clarify that with Tara or Travis or somebody and see.
Yeah, and again, my point is just that this is the format, the standard that's been used. I did mention 2C only because there has been talk and comments over the years of, well, the city used to fund whatever, I can't remember, but it's not counted, but there's, $50 million in general fund going to maintenance of streets. The only other thing I'd say is if there is a change or request for information, that be, I guess, required of all the member governments, not just the city. Yeah, because I think they're reporting similarly too.
Carlos.
And yeah, just as just a general information comment to addressing Gene's concern about disclosure of this information. Yet one of my other side projects here is actually working with the city on the open data policy. I'm actually a software developer and actually getting this data in machine readable form that you can actually be doing something with like that. There is actually the city of Colorado Springs is in the process of putting together what's called an open data policy. And I will raise this as a question because I've asked this. Hey, this is very difficult to get the transportation information out of the city systems. So as part in my capacity as helping on this, it's a very informal advisory committee, but these are the kinds of things I want to go ahead and bring forward because we're trying to, I think the term is we're trying to liberate this data from these internal systems. And one of them is making sure we can do some of these apples to apples comparisons, understand some of these budget categories so we can actually do year-over-year comparisons, which is really what ultimately we like to see. Instead of just a snapshot in time, we want to see it trends. We want to see if we're going in the right direction. And I'll bring it up with the person who's putting that policy together and in working on releasing this data so it is available to the public.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so Rick, you want
thumbs up, thumbs down, or postpone?
Yeah. So let's say, do we recommend accepting? I hear a recommendation
Move to approve. To recommend approval.
Recommend approval of the member government's maintenance of effort statements. Here, a second. Second, Rick. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One. Gene. Okay. All right. City of Colorado Springs expenditure encumbrance report for America the Beautiful pedestrian bridge. Mike's provided this letter that kind of shows where we, at our request of where the $3.5 million that the board approved, up to $3.5 million the board approved for that bridge. Does anyone have any questions for Mike on this letter? Toll bridge. Is it a managed bridge?
And I did have questions for Mike, but I'll let him speak.
Go ahead.
I don't know.
We don't need a
Hey,
discussion.
first of all, I just wanted to, I actually met with Mike earlier this week, and I just wanted kudos to taking time out of his lunch period to actually go through, helping me understand the change orders and task orders. I'm the new guy on the block, and there's a lot of numbers here, and I'll be honest, I'm still trying to wrap my brain around it. But I wanted just to get some clarification on what the amounts are for the Pikes Peak Greenway, that PPRTA 2 budget. There's a 2016 budget amount. I think it was in some of the other change orders. It was $3.1 million. And then there's also in the one of the and actually it's in the packet today, and this comes from Bev, but there's also a 3.9 total amount as well. And I just wanted to understand that $800,000 difference there. And you could help me.
Okay, the budget was originally approved at $3.1 million. During a PPRTA board meeting, the former mayor of Manitou Springs proposed, and it was approved by the board, to be $3.5 million flat, up to $3.5 million. Thank you. Okay, that's where, I don't know where the number is, 3.9. I've not seen that number, but.
Okay, so the difference is there's other than this bridge in the Pikes Peak Greenway project.
Yes.
That is a pot of money of which this bridge is a part of the funding. So there is actually some other Greenway, Pikes Peak Greenway projects other than this bridge funded. So that accommodates, that makes up, that's a general statement, Mike. I'm not trying to get into it.
Yeah, no.
And so there's more than the pedestrian bridge across the railroad to the museum that is that's funded in that pot of money. Does that help, Carlos?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm just going back to Bev's report, where it has the Pikes Peak Greenway corridor improvements. It has a 2017 budget with carryover is $3 million. So that would be pretty close to that. It looks like I see close to $900,000. It might actually just cover that. Change that have that discrepancy covered there, but it's just kind of confusing when I look at these reports from Bev. I'm trying to find that where it actually had a $3.9 million. Let's see.
Like I said, it's just the pot is a bigger pot of money than just the pedestrian bridge. This report was only addressing the level of effort to date and projection for the pedestrian bridge, right?
Yes. Although I believe the 3,121,000 is how much the board has approved toward this line item.
Right.
And I was explaining to Carlos that there's 1.1 that was originally put in the budget that was for greenway improvements, and on top of that, the up to $3.5 million is to be added. We haven't fully funded. If you add the 3.5 and the 1.1, we haven't put that, actually put it into the budget.
Right.
Ballparky, so out of the $2.6 million that we are thinking we either have spent some or plan on spending on the bridge, roughly $1.3 million has been spent, and there's about $1 million encumbered, and it leaves, that's just sitting there.
Sure, right. It's in the budget, but it hadn't been allocated.
Yeah. So we will need to, put more money into this line item down the line.
Yeah, what I'm looking for, it was from Bev's reports, it was the revised 10-year budget as of December 31st, 2017, had a line item in there of 3.9. In your reports, Mike, you had the budget amount was 3.1. I was just trying to get that extra, trying to understand, and I understand there is this pedestrian bridge, and so actually being able to distinguish in the budget item, everything seems to be rolled up in the Pikes Peak Greenway, and I just wanted to understand what's being allocated, and of course we have the 3.5 not to exceed, but I wanted to understand, what do we have left for other projects? We have the Uinta Bridge, and there's a lot of other needs on the Pikes Peak Greenway, and I'm getting that question from the community, is that, the bridge is great, but how much do we have left for, or what else do we have left that needs to be funded? And I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah, and we've had this discussion And I think, just to be very brief, the city has allocated a pot of money in their capital and maintenance budgets, and it's up to them to allocate that across their projects. And we have not required a detailed breakdown of the things within those projects as how much is going to each project in past. That is not what we've done, and it's not been our tradition to do that. How they spend that money, they're answerable to, they are accountable to the people for doing that. There's been a couple of meetings where we've expressed our concern about taking all, or actually spend 2 years, maybe or more, of the Pikes Peak Greenway funding that's all going toward this bridge. And while there's a lot of improvements to that greenway, but that's the city's decision on how to allocate their money.
Carlos, the good news is that the rumors say that the bridge will be so nice, you'll get ice cream when you cross it and a back massage.
I am looking forward to it. No, I'm just looking at, going back to Bev's report. This was agenda item number 5. This is from Bev. I don't know if she's here anymore, but I'm just looking on the next to last page. Pikes Peak Greenway corridor improvements, revised project budget. That's $3.9 million. This is the second to the last page. And that's, by the way, it's been there for a long time. I went back and looked at some previous reports back in March, and that number is kind of just, that's the number that's been there. I just wanted to understand, I'm just trying to reconcile that 3.9 with what appeared in, Mike, in some of your reports, a budget of 3.1.
Yeah, let me go with Bev and see. Maybe I missed.
No.
Did you see it on the second to last page?
I see exactly what you're saying.
What's that
and
number?
There are other things in that pot that's in the Pikes Peak Greenway project. In that 3.9, it's more than just the bridge. I don't know what they are, and they haven't told us.
No, but what I thought we had 3.1 only, so I might have missed something.
Okay.
So I'll get with Bev and see if I'm.
So you agree that there's something?
Well, I just need to confirm.
We have a budget number here of 3.9. You're
so we need to see
3.1, and
what's the difference.
What's the difference there? Okay, you understand.
Right.
Thank you.
Mike, I'd like to personally thank you for putting this forward. I think I was the one that asked for it a few months ago, so I appreciate it because their questions come up each time the bridge comes up.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Well.
Okay. Moving on. Item 7B, City Carlos Springs monthly change order property acquisition. You got anything? Is that me? That's you again. Yep. It's informational. So, anybody have any questions on any of the reports on here? Seeing none, thank you very much. Jennifer, El Paso County change order property acquisition.
Has she had a pleasant afternoon waiting?
It's kind of like a football item. You get the next play bonus, so they can't replay.
These are regular reporting items. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Hey, Jennifer, I do have just not about your change order request in general. The Monument Hill Road, when is that work? It's my understanding, is it going to go from that traffic light or stop sign just north of the park and ride up to county line? Is that right?
The overall project that was identified in our original scope of the PPRTA, we wanted to look at the entire corridor, but we have allocated for that project about $4 million. So in looking at that entire corridor and in doing the evaluation, most of the significant issues and most of the significant traffic is on the south end there. So our first phase of our project is going to occur between Misty Acres Boulevard, which is right there by the school, and all the way down south to the intersection. And our goal there is to try and get a good handle on and use not use as much money, but utilize that initial money and try and make it go as far as possible. And then if we have money left over, we'll look at additional improvements. What I would say is that the section of Monument Hill Road, kind of from County Line Road down south, a little bit further south, not quite to Misty Acres Boulevard, because that intersection with County Line Road is so close to the interstate, there is some development that is occurring in that area, and the Board of County Commissioners has actually approved a preliminary plan for that undeveloped area, and that plan actually reroutes Monument Hill Road. So that's the other reason why we're pushing the money all the way down south, is because we anticipate that that the location of Monument Hill Road with that development would be relocated, and in trying to be good stewards of taxpayers' dollars, recognizing that a developer is going to do that, our intent is to leave that for the developer as part of the development. What I'd hate to do is build a bunch of new improvements in the current alignment and then have it ripped out. So that's kind of the thought. What I would also say is that we've been coordinating with CDOT, recognizing the improvements to I-25 and coordinating those on a Monument Hill Road. Monument Hill Road was actually, up until recently, and we still have some paperwork to do, was actually CDOT's. And that, as the county took, as the Powers Boulevard swap was finalized in 2004, what roads, that was a road that the county took over from CDOT. And so, recognizing that, that there need to be some improvements, that's why we included it on the PPRTA extension list. And also, not that staff was making that decision, but also because we got that input also from the citizens, the school, and our Highway Advisory Commission in developing, and ultimately our Board of County Commissioners recommended the final projects that were on there. But we want to make sure that we're maximizing the dollars on that project and putting it to where we have some of the biggest safety issues.
Yeah. When do you expect that to start?
Well, we're wrapping up the right-of-way acquisition. We have some final coordination to occur between us and CDOT. We're hoping it will go to construction this year. In fact, I've encouraged my staff to, as we're finalizing some of the right-of-way, to go ahead and get it out to bid so that we get that bids, and then we'll determine kind of a good start date. But I think that there's some, as we're finalizing the right-of-way, you know, the paperwork that needs to catch up between El Paso County and CDOT. I think that there is the opportunity to get the contractor on board. We also have the opportunity, I think, to do some advanced utility relocation. And we've been coordinating with the school there to ensure that hopefully we can, if we get somebody on board and get everything falls into place, we do some of the work, you know, during spring break. We do some of the work during the summer so that we have the least impact to the schools possible.
Quite the mess around school time, yeah.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Jennifer on her property acquisition and change order report? Okay. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay. Administrative item number 8, report on recent board actions. Mr. Rick.
You have the memo in your packet. Any questions about what the board did at their last meeting?
Legislative report.
Okay. In my memo, you can see that there are 3 bills that we are following. And the we is staff and the PPRTA attorney and the board's lobbyist, Dan Jablan of Cherry Point Strategies. The first one is Senate Bill 88, and that's the bill that's intended to remedy the unintended consequence of last year's Senate Bill 17-267, which accidentally, that's my opinion, accidentally removed the PPRTA tax and also the RTD tax and some other special district tax on recreational marijuana. So this bill is the legislature's intention to remedy that. It has passed through the Senate. It's now in the House. It has passed on first reading in the House, and it's close, or maybe that's happening today, second reading and debate on the House floor. Sorry, that's tomorrow, according to I'm now reading from our email from our lobbyist. And then he says he would expect it to pass the House on second reading tomorrow and move to third reading and the official vote, final vote on Friday or Monday. That's Senate Bill 88. Any questions on the first one? Pardon me? Yes. Okay, the next one is Senate Bill 1, the big transportation bill introduced on the Senate side. It would submit to the voters, but not with a tax increase, just for bonding or revenue anticipation notes, RANs. And I don't have a, we're just monitoring that. That would help the GAP project. I don't have current status from our lobbyists on that. I did not make the time today to check. So again, we're just monitoring that, not recommending that the CAC recommending action to the board. And then on the House side, there's a very close approximation in the House side of House Bill 1119, very similar to Senate Bill 1, and we're just monitoring that as well. And we have not heard of any other bills being introduced that would impact pro or con the RTA statutes. So I'm not seeing a need for a recommendation. I put it as action just in case it evolved into a recommendation from the CAC, but I'm not seeing the need for recommendation unless any of you do.
Did anybody have any objection just to changing it to a informational item at this point based on the current status of those bills? If you have no objection, we'll change it to an informational only, unless we need to go through a procedural thing.
That's fine. I'll probably leave it as action on the board agenda.
Okay.
To give them the flexibility. It's easier to downgrade it than have to upgrade it.
Okay.
Can we just go forward to the recommendation that we approve the recommendations of the staff?
Well, but the staff, I'm not recommending anything.
Please.
Okay, how about this? The staff recommendation is to monitor.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the staff's recommendation to monitor these projects?
So moved.
Second.
Good compromise.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Gene?
Just a question on item 1. You had said you'll have an update by the time of the CAC meeting.
And I'm sorry I failed to do that.
Has anything come in that would make us want to lean one way or the other on changing the status? Yeah. Just yes or no?
That our lobbyist has not informed me of anything, and I don't have any information to steer me or to recommend to you to oppose, particularly to support or oppose. So that's why the best course of action, if I don't have any strong information, pro or con, is just to go with monitor.
All right. Any other questions? All right. What about any agenda topics for next meeting? Anything burning we need to bring up? Cheryl? I need to have a little bit further discussion. I think he made a good point. If we're going to require additional level of detail from them, we may need to do it for both. Let me see if I can get this informally and maybe get an answer back. If not, we may have to make an agenda item. If that's, but is that acceptable, Cheryl?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Any members have any communications? Tom?
I do. Some of you have probably wondered at times why Monument and Palmer Lake are not part of the RTA, and I will tell you that sometime back, the trustees for those two communities voted not to be part of this. They recognized somewhat that that was probably long-term a good decision for, in the big scheme of things, in the El Paso County against Colorado Springs and everything else. We have been talking about it up in the Tri-Lakes area for some time, And under NEPCO, the Northern El Paso County Coalition of Community Organizations or Associations, held a meeting on the 13th of January. And Jennifer presented El Paso County's status for roads up in that part of the county. Rick came up and presented how RTAs are put together. And I also presented for Monument and for Tri-View Metropolitan. It's a very complex relationship on who owns the roads up there and everything. And we put together a proposal out of that meeting that we form an exploratory committee to establish a Tri-Lakes RTA, and that is moving forward. We're getting good data support out of El Paso County at this point. We're looking at the various taxing options and stuff like that. We have talked to both of the commissioners for that part of the county. We've talked to Monument, we've talked to Palmer Lake, we've talked to Tri-View, and there apparently is a move to send, let's go explore this further. The area up there has about 85,000 residents now. It's fairly significant. Monument is one of the faster growing areas in the county and frankly in the state. NEPCO has reviewed enough housing over the last 2017 for about another 4,000 homes up there. So it's going to continue to grow. And so we need to address the transportation issues. Monument in 2018 has $250,000 available for all of its roads, period. And that's not going to make it happen. So we'll keep you informed as this goes forward. It's probably, as Rick pointed out, a 2-year process to get this before it even comes before the voters. So a lot of work left to do, but we're starting to get some activity.
And BARTA is done and dead, right?
Baptist Road stopped collecting funds back on June 30th of 2016, I believe.
Yeah, it was about the time they dedicated the bridge or something, right, Jen? About the time they dedicated the bridge, wasn't that about the end, about the same time?
BRTA, correct, has stopped collecting any revenues. We still do have some financial things that we have to do. BRTA made an IGA with El Paso County to essentially have El Paso County finalize those things because after a certain time we still have to do audits and items like that. There was a remaining amount of money that was transferred, that was not left over, but had not yet been spent. We got direction from the BRTA board on how to spend that remaining money. We did a project last year to put the sidewalk and do median cover on Baptist Road within that corridor as directed by the BRTA board. The county did the procurement, did the oversight of the project, and we are going to be reporting the final reporting of how that final money was spent. But essentially, at this point, there is no BRTA board left.
Okay.
So.
And when BRTA was collecting taxes, it was strictly over the Monument Marketplace where Home Depot and Walmart and those places are. The rest of the area didn't have anything. Nothing has come in to replace it as far as the tax revenue source.
Right. Okay. All right.
Question, clarification from Tom. And Rick, you might be able to answer this. We've got an issue south of here around PPCC, okay? What happens if they form an RTA? Does that remove them from the county? In other words, they are part of unincorporated El Paso County.
That's,
Basically walks up, I'll say it's subject to negotiation.
Of what?
Everything I'm about to say would need to have one or more attorneys double check what I'm going to say. But here you go.
Okay.
There are 4 revenue categories in the RTA statute. The sales tax is limited to 1 cent, regardless of how many pancakes of RTAs you have stacked on top of each other. We learned that with the BRTA overlap area, and that's why the BRTA board and the PPRTA board in the overlap area split the money 50-50. It's my opinion that you can have more than one RTA, especially if they are not using the same revenue source. You'll remember that Representative Larry Liston in 2009 added the option for any RTA to go to their voters and ask for a property tax up to 5 mils.
Right.
So you have the sales tax up to 1 cent. You have the property tax up to 5 mils. You have the, what I call hotel motel tax, the visitor benefit tax. I think at the cap is 2%. And then you have a up to $10 a year per vehicle on a vehicle registration fee. Those are your 4. So it's my opinion, not reviewed by an attorney, that you can have overlapping RTAs, especially if they're using different revenue sources.
Okay.
Now, if there's an RTA, but there's also in RTA statute, there's a provision that our founding member governments adopted in establishing IGA, which mirrors what's in the statute for excluding an area. Of course, those of you who have been here a few years, you remember that the City of Colorado Springs Airport asked for an exclusion of an L-shaped acreage around the airport so that those commercial areas would not pay the RTA tax. They also asked for a county exclusion of the sales tax in that same area. And lo and behold, lots of businesses have gone into that ground or in existing empty buildings. So there is an option, or there is a process for applicants of property to request to be excluded from the area that the voters approved originally in November 2004. So a new RTA could go to our board and say, this tabletop is RTA, but we want a new Tri-Lakes RTA right over here. So please exclude, and we want it to be sales tax. Please exclude this corner, this geography, and yield so that a new RTA could have the sales tax that the PPRTA is currently collecting. So there is such a process that could be approached. Okay. Did I answer all your questions?
Oh, yeah, as well as you can, and I exclude any, quote, liability as a lawyer.
Yes.
Just an opinion, an educated opinion.
Sure.
Let's hold off on that.
If, with those areas that get excluded, does that end up changing the balance on the percentages within the PPRTA if something ends up getting excluded, or no? Or doesn't it have any effect on that?
Excellent question. I would guess yes.
Okay.
That if unincorporated county dropped by a 0.5% because of an area was excluded, that the unincorporated county capital and maintenance would drop accordingly by the location of the residents.
Okay.
All right, any other comments, questions? Here's your last chance. Thank you, Bill. Adjourned.
I don't know if that's on. Well,
I'm not denying. Come out to my pickup and I'll show you something. 2018 budget county. When I say that, it's 2018 county budget.
Oh, well, I've got to go. I've got a funeral to go to.
I'm sorry? It is a very simple calculation to do it, but over multiple categories and major inflation rates over 15 years, it's going to be a pain in the butt to go out. The ones that's in place is very simple to do.
No,
Well,
thanks.
I think that, again,
But
I go
apparently,
back to,
see, mine's two days.
there
There was no plan. He planned his for quite a while.
of the
but I
budget
had-
category
poor judgment. And torn mine, a lot worse than his. Although I've been running, I would have won that. No, seriously,
What was a separate pattern?
we just happened to
Fell the other day on some
and come to
stone.
find out that his plant is for quite a while.
While I had this on.
I didn't schedule mine for January 3rd.
What we're